Am I the asshole for being kind to my student before pushing him into hell? Because an evil sentient computer said I had to for the plot? I, immortal male, woke up one day transmigrated into the shittiest stallion papa novel I'd ever read as the Scum villain. My student, then 14 male, had been bullied relentlessly under the original goods. I, of course, put an end to all of it immediately, took the little sheep as my personal disciple, and even moved him into my house. Ever since I transmigrated, I've had a system in my head, forcing me to adhere to major plot lines, awarding points, and threatening punishments. Even though I disabled the OOC function pretty early on, it still forced my hand. My disciple had to fight an elder demon because of it. The big incident happened when my student was 17. We traveled to the Immortal Alliance conference, where the rising disciples could compete, make connections, and raise their reputations. After the first day, the conference was invaded by high-level demons. Me, and the other Immortal Masters, entered the field to assist the disciples. During the invasion, my student's half-demon heritage was revealed. At the same time, a rift into the Endless Abyss opened. According to the system, my student falling into the Endless Abyss was a fixed plot point. So, under threat of death, I had to push him in. Here's where I might be the asshole. For years, up to this point, I'd been kind to my student. I didn't want him to suffer under my tutelage. But I still pushed him. I also may have said some unkind words before I did it. I kind of blacked out at the time, but when I pulled myself back together, the system informed me that my student had accumulated 10,000 heartbreak points. Am I the asshole for giving him hope and kindness before pushing him into hell and breaking his heart? Will he be justified in exacting revenge on his scum villain teacher like he did in the original book? Should I let him? Hey y'all, I did it! I'm making the next part of my way too long, way too detailed plot recap and analysis of the Scum Villain Self-Saving System by MXTX. This time we're talking Volume 2. But first, a disclaimer. Just like Volume 1, this book is rated 17+. There's explicit language, graphic violence, sexual themes, and more. I will include a full list of content warnings in the description. And trust me, this one has a lot more. Honestly, I think I'm gonna have to add a couple of extra warnings in there as we go.
This system will aid user 003 once again.
With that out of the way, let's keep talking about my personal favorite book. Chapter-wise, we pick up right where Volume 1 left off, Chapter 6. Although there has been a bit of a time skip. It's been 3 years since Binghe fell into the abyss. Sheng-Qing Cho found himself with a lot of wanderlust, since he and Airplane Bro went mushroom picking. He comes back to the sect every once in a while to pick up his meds from Mu Qingfang and get his meridians cleansed by Lu Qingge. And sometimes he swings by Qingjing Peak to check in on his disciples. 3 years flew by. He's back at the sect now because Yue Qingyuan sent out an emergency meeting request. When he lands, there's a cute little moment where Ming Fan and Ning Yingying come to greet him. He notes how they've grown up handsomely. Well, he calls Ming Fang lanky and less petty looking, which I guess is a compliment. He does wax some poetry about how pretty Ning Yingying has gotten, before getting war flashbacks about all the castration comments he left. And yeah, what a cute moment. Ming Fan and Ning Yingying escort Sheng-Qing Cho to Qiangding Peak, and stand behind him in the meeting room like good little ducklings. Sheng-Qing Cho observes that all the Peak Lords have a couple of personal disciples with them, except Lu Qingge. Baijiang Peak works a little differently than the other peaks, in that it's less teaching and more Lord of the Flies. The only way to secure the position of the next Baijiang Peak Lord is to defeat the current Baijiang Peak Lord. Thus, Lu Qingge has no trusted disciples to stand behind him. And boy oh boy, wouldn't it be a shame if someone threw Lu Qingge a kid and some adoption papers? What a shame indeed. Almost as big of a shame as Luo Binghe, Sheng-Qing Cho's most trusted disciple, not being able to stand behind him and nope, repress that, back in the box. Anyway, time for a Peak Lord meeting. Jinlan City has an ideal location in the Central Plains where 2 major rivers intersect. Because of that, the city's a major trading hub by both land and water. 2 months ago, the city shut its gates, completely sealing themselves off from the rest of the world. They ghosted all of their contracts, and not even letters could be relayed. That was until 20 days ago. A merchant escaped the city via an underground waterway and ran to Zhaohua Monastery, the closest sect to the city. Yue Qingyuan explains. That middle-aged man was the owner of Jinlan City's first weapon shop. Over the years, he had often gone to Zhaohua Monastery to pray and burn incense, so quite a few of the temple's monks knew him. When he arrived, he was swathed entirely in black cloth, with only half his face exposed. He was already wholly exhausted by the time he reached Zhaohua Monastery, and he collapsed on the mountain steps as he told them repeatedly that there was a terrifying plague within the city. The monks guarding the mountain immediately carried the man into the main hall and reported the event to the head abbot. By the time the head abbot rushed out with several other masters, it was too late. Not only had the guy died, but his body had decayed to the point where only his bones remained. Even more than that, in the brief wait for the head abbot, the monks tried to make him more comfortable by removing some of the black cloth. But as soon as they tried to touch him, he, quote, wailed in terrible pain. The monks were concerned and sent masters to the city that night. When they didn't hear from them, they sent word out to the other major sects. Huanhua Palace and Tianyi Temple both sent teams to the city, but there had been no contact from them either. Of the 4 major sects, it's just Sangqiang that has yet to respond. Hence, emergency Peak Lord meeting. They have to decide which Peak Lords will go to investigate and which will stay behind to guard the sect. We wouldn't want another Sha Hualing incident. Mu Qingfang is the most obvious one to go. As the cultivation world's most accomplished healer, he has the best chance to deal with this mysterious plague. Lu Qingge volunteers to escort him. After all, there is yet to be a danger that the war god of Baijiang could not defeat.
Foreshadowing, foreshadowing, foreshadowing. Important things must be said 3 times.
Shen Qingqiu volunteers to go as well because he's worried. And not for the reasons you're thinking of, though, I guarantee. Here's where Shen Qingqiu fights his hardest against the fandom's Disney princessification of his character. Mu Qingfang makes his medicine. Lu Qingge clears his meridians. If anyone has any plot armor, it's not Shen Qingqiu. If his only 2 barriers against the wife plottiest wife plot poison are going to Jinlan City, then he's going to. Also, as the Qingjing Peak Lord and the #1 mod of the PIDW wiki, if they're dealing with some sort of demon plot, he's the most likely to know about it. It's the second reason that convinces Yue Qingyuan to let him go. Okay, game plan. The book calls them the Liu Shen Mu trio, which, cute. So, the trio will go into the city, and a second team will camp outside the city in case there's any need for backup, and the rest of the Peak Lords will remain to protect the sect. The only way into the city is through the same underground waterway the merchant used. The gate hasn't been opened for the 2 months of lockdown, so there's no way they just let them in. The walls are high, certainly not high enough that a cultivator flying on a sword couldn't hop it. However, some years ago, Jinlan City made a deal with Zhaohua Monastery to cast a barrier over the top of the city to prevent exactly that. So, waterway it is. Our trio marches through the forest, to a cave, and down into the underground riverbed. They find a little boat and a single oar. Shen Qingqiu wastes no time volunteering Lu Shidi to paddle them upstream. And he does. Very well. I'm a Lu Qingge stan. There's a little paragraph describing the Qingge, scowl on his face, punting their little boat a, quote, incredible distance with every stroke of the paddle. It's delightful. The water is clear, and even in the dim light, they can see fish swimming around them. Shen Qingqiu remarks on it before spotting another, much larger, human corpse-shaped fish. As stated in my contract, I will now read Shen Qingqiu's perfect inner monologue. Fuck. A floating corpse? I just said, this water is so clear, and you reward me by drifting over a floating corpse? Do you have to be so heavy-handed when you slap my face? Thank you. Let's continue. The Qingge uses the oar to flip the body over, and they discover that it's a skeleton wrapped completely in black cloth, just like the report of the merchant from Zhaohua Monastery. And then they see another, and another. They spot 6 sets of remains before Lu Qingge abruptly anchors the boat by just stabbing the oar into the stone cave wall. Oh, Lu Shidi, please never change. Our favorite brute doesn't act without reason, though. Someone is there. A little boy, as it seems. He shouts at them to leave the city. There's a plague. Do you not understand human speech? Hurry and get out, or else I won't be so polite. Before he finished speaking, he was attacking them with a spear, ferocious like a tiger, and heartily intimidating. Lu Qingge let out a disdainful laugh, and he pulled the bamboo oar out of the wall. With a flick of the pole, the youth was sent flying into the river. Yet the boy continued to spit and curse even while splashing about in the water. "Should we fish him out?" asked Shen Qingqiu. "What for? He's young and full of energy. Let's go." Lu Qingge continued to push them forward. The trio exited the underground river, and the illicit boat drifted back into the darkness along with the current. The exit was at the city's most overgrown pond, and not a single person was around. After they walked towards the center of the city for a while, out of nowhere, a set of footsteps caught up to them from behind. The bedraggled youth charged forward and yelled at them, flustered and annoyed. "I told you not to enter the city. What use is it to have you here? So many people have already come, saying they were going to save us from the plague. Head monks and big-shot Taoists, Hua Palace, whoever. In the end, none of them were able to leave. You are looking for death." So this young man had ambushed them in the dark with their best interests in mind. "Then, since we have already entered, what do you think we should do?" Shen Qingqiu asked. "What else can you do?" the youth replied. "Follow me and don't run around. I'll take you to the old monk." The kid's name is Yang Yishuan. He introduces himself as the son of the merchant that first told Xiaohua Monastery about the plague. Yang Yishuan was determined and spirited enough to take a few blows from the Baizhan war god. Not at full strength, obviously, but still. Plus, he was newly orphaned. Shen Qingqiu casually mentions that Lu Qingge should consider taking him on as a disciple. Lu Qingge just scoffs. He doesn't take disciples. All Baizhan disciples have to choose to scale the mountain themselves in order to become a part of the peak. Side note, this is kind of the only time it comes up in this volume, but I love this. Baizhan doesn't choose disciples in the disciple selection, or at least it doesn't under Lu Qingge. During the disciple selection where Lu Binghe joined Sangqiang Mountain Sect, it was said that he caused tension between the lords of Qingjing and Baizhan. Lu Qingge noticed a child with enormous potential for physical cultivation. Allegedly, scummy Shen Qingqiu swiped the kid from Lu Qingge to be petty and spiteful. And that's how Lu Binghe first joined Qingjing Peak, despite being unsuited for their spiritual cultivation style. But wait, Lu Qingge doesn't take disciples. They have to choose for themselves. But what would persuade a child to climb Baizhan on their own? Perhaps being shown and told over and over that they are unsuited for the cultivation style of the peak that first took them on? Perhaps being shown how to stand up for themselves and fight back against their martial siblings. Baizhan disciples spar constantly. But Binghe never did fight back, did he? He also never left Qingjing to scale Baizhan. And in this story, the scum villain and strategist that chose Binghe for his peak is gone. So I guess we'll never know. This is all speculation on my part, by the way. MXTX doesn't confirm anything, but us fans will gather up all the crumbs we can. Anyway, back to the story. Yang Yishuan leads the trio of peak lords to his late father's shop, the Jinzi weapon shop. It's quite large with 4 storefronts surrounding a common courtyard. There's even a cellar, which is where the group is led. The shop was clearly very successful, which makes sense in the once booming trade city of Jinlan, but it also feels all the more tragic and eerie in the practically desolate ghost town that the plague has made. Master Wu Chen from Xiaohua Monastery sits in the cellar, his legs covered in black cloth. He doesn't stand to greet them.
Content warning for descriptions of disease and body horror.
Master Wu Chen reveals he cannot stand in greeting as he begins to unravel the cloth. From his knees down, his legs disappear. He begins to explain what he knows of the plague so far. The disease first appears as a small red rash on the affected area. Then, anywhere between 3 days and 2 weeks, the patches expand and fester. After another month, the flesh begins to rot down to the bone. The process can only be delayed by swathing the body in black cloth to limit exposure to light and the elements. Eventually, the body parts will rot away entirely, hence Master Wu Chen's missing legs. They've also discovered this 1 to 2 month progression only applies within the bounds of Jinlan City. Once the infected leaves a certain radius of the city walls, the disease accelerates tenfold. Hence why Yi Yishuan's father barely made it to Xiaohua before the decay took his life. Unfortunately, Master Wu Chen hasn't made much progress besides mapping the disease's symptoms and timeline. They don't know the origin, how it spreads, or how to cure it. It spreads rapidly, but it doesn't seem to be infectious. Case in point, Yi Yishuan has been taking care of Master Wu Chen for the past month, and still seems perfectly healthy. Mu Qingfang takes the time to examine Master Wu Chen's legs. If anyone can cure this plague, it's the Qiankao Peak Lord. And as proof, after the examination, our Mu Shidi does have some ideas. But he needs to examine more patients to be sure. Luo Shidi jumps right on that. He disappears to gather up some people. Shen Qingqiu decides to walk about the city and see if he can observe anything. Mu Qifang chooses to stay with Master Wu Chen. As he's wandering, Shen Qingqiu runs into Yi Yixuan again, looking disgruntled. He asks him what's wrong, and Yi Yixuan complains that the useless Hua whatever sect has sent more stupid disciples to die. Shen Qingqiu does his best to distract him from the Huanhua disciples by suggesting he go find Le Qingge, and that, quote, fighting a few rounds with that Gege will be more effective training than learning from anyone. Yi Yixuan sets off, and Shen Qingqiu returns to wander the desolate, depressing streets. He passes a makeshift soup kitchen and resolves to find a cure for this plague as quickly as possible. Just then, he passes a hunched-back figure of an old woman. The bowl in her hand shakes as she makes her way to the soup kitchen. Just as they pass each other, she stumbles and falls directly into Shen Qingqiu. He rights her, and she mumbles some apologies before continuing on. Shen Qingqiu had just turned to do the same when... Hold on. The woman seemed so frail that a stiff wind could have knocked her over, so why did she feel heavier and sturdier than that of an adult man when she crashed into him? He quickly spins around and sees the cloaked figure, not in line for soup, but in a full sprint down a dark alleyway. If that's not suspicious enough for him to give chase, then system help him what is. It's mid-chase when he feels an itch from the back of his hand, and sure enough, it's covered in a patch of red welts, a clear sign of infection. Shen Qingqiu curses. It's the same hand that was infected with Without a Cure in the battle against Elder Skyhammer. Even more than that, it's the same hand that first opened Proud Immortal Demon Way. Shen Qingqiu laments not just cutting it off. In his momentary distraction, he runs into someone else, Gong Yizhao. He must be leading the group of Huanhua disciples that just entered the city. Gong Yizhao confirms that, yes, he was a part of the group that recently arrived at Jinlan City, but he's not the one leading the group. How curious. If head disciple Gong Yizhao isn't leading the group, then who is? He should keep his head disciple status until Luo Binghe returns from the Abyss in another 2 years. How curious. There's not enough time to contemplate, though. The woman is getting away. They resolve to chase her together. She jumps into a 3-story building. The decorations and faint lingering fragrance identified the building as once being a brothel. There are many rooms. Shen Qingqiu and Gong Yizhao decide to split up to search the private ones. Many rooms in a row each contain the corpses of women in formal dress. It seemed like this brothel had been practically wiped out. As Shen Qingqiu was about to push open the 6th room, he heard the sound of movement and human voices from the 2nd floor. As he flew up the stairs with Gong Yizhao, Shen Qingqiu stole to the front. But unexpectedly, before his feet had left the staircase, he heard the gentle voice of a youth. "It's no trouble." Though it was only 3 words, as soon as Shen Qingqiu heard this voice, it was as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. The fan in his hand cracked under the force of his grip. It was a youth wearing black, shouldering a modest, unadorned longsword, his complexion as clear as jade, his eyes like 2 deep pools of cold starlight, and he was at present nonchalantly moving towards Shen Qingqiu. At the same time, a familiar voice, which had spent a long time gathering dust, spoke in Shen Qingqiu's head. In a mechanical tone, reminiscent of Google Translate, it began to spout off messages like a barrage of gunfire.
Hello, system activation successful. Central power source us operating normally and in good condition. Hibernation mode suspended. Normal operation mode activated. Download and installation of update complete.
Wait a minute, what the fuck? You actually updated?
Thank you for your continued use of our services.
Can I get a refund? Shen Qingqiu stared at that young man, who ought to have been familiar, yet seemed a stranger. His limbs went stiff and his throat dry. Wasn't Luo Binghe's grand comeback supposed to be 5 years after his fall? Wasn't he currently supposed to be inside an endless hell, carving his way through thorns, studying the blade, and farming monsters? Why had his ascension moved up 2 whole years? Why were you so impatient? If you rush your leveling, you won't have any safeguards, Binghe. Luo Binghe strolled over and spoke softly. It really is Shizun. His voice was velvety and light, but every word that emerged from between his teeth, and every tap of his footfalls as he took each step, sent Shen Qingqiu's heart through the equivalent of a high-altitude bungee jump combined with an ice bucket challenge. The guillotine blade was already over his neck. nothing left but to face it. So, Binghe's back from the abyss early. Surprise! It certainly is for Shen Qingqiu. The first thing he notices is that Binghe is taller than him now. During the Immortal Alliance conference, they were about eye level with each other. Now, Shen Qingqiu has to distinctly look up at his former disciple. The second thing he notices is the not at all hidden disdain that all the Huanhua disciples behind Binghe are shooting at him. Some of them were even flashing their weapons at him. They were reacting like he was a demon rather than a respected elder from another sect. Gong Yizhao sees this and is horrified. He chastises his martial siblings. They reluctantly put their swords away, but Shen Qingqiu is too busy freaking the fuck out to really care. Luo Binghe is back from the abyss. 2 years early. What the actual fuck is going on? No wonder Gong Yizhao wasn't in charge of the group. When faced with the protagonist, no one else could possibly be the leader. It's on top of these revelations that Shen Qingqiu finally notices a third thing. The fake old lady they were chasing lies dead in the corner of the room. And through a slash in the sleeve of his robe, he can see that Luo Binghe has also been infected. Shen Qingqiu is immediately concerned. Binghe's annoying little entourage keep chiming in to insult Shen Qingqiu, or praise Luo Binghe. How can we trust this wicked man after how he treated Luo Shishong? I bet you're so happy that Luo Shishong was infected, aren't you? Ah, Luo Shishong was injured protecting us. How valiant! Side note, during my summary of Volume 1, I mentioned that this story is rife with misunderstandings between our two main leads. As you can imagine, now that they're reunited, and due to Shen Qingqiu's chronic unreliable narrator syndrome, those misunderstandings are going to start popping up like weeds. I feel like knowing that Bingqiu is endgame here makes it fairly obvious where these two misunderstand each other, but nevertheless, I will endeavor to use the power of editing to subtly let y'all in on when shenanigans are afoot. Okay, back to the story. Shen Qingqiu knows that if Luo Binghe is back, and with Huanhua Palace, then his demonic side must be well under his control. With his OP heavenly demon blood fully unlocked, such a plague can easily be wiped from his system. So, because Luo Binghe allowed himself to be injured, protecting these Huanhua disciples, along with his earlier observations, Shen Qingqiu can only come to a single conclusion. Luo Binghe must have planned all of this. This ruse must be to endear himself to Huanhua and gain their trust. Shen Qingqiu loses a mini stare-down with Luo Binghe, looking away first to observe the corpse in the corner. It was a demon, that much was obvious. Its corpse, now exposed, had the texture of a creature boiled alive. Shen Qingqiu knew what that was. A sour. A sour was a type of profession among demons. To put it mundanely, as Shen Qingqiu understood it, they were the demon realm's equivalent of farmers, farm owners, and wholesale food distributors. Due to a variety of reasons, including local geography and race, many of the demon realm's creatures had a rather peculiar biological needs. This included a portion of demons who tended towards hardcore tastes. To put it concretely, they liked to eat rotten things. The more rancid and putrid, the better. Anything crawling with maggots was considered both an exceptionally exquisite delicacy and abundantly nutritious. But where could one acquire such a quantity of rotten things? This was the purpose of the sours. The flesh of any non-demonic organism a sour touched, and purposefully seeded, would, after a short period of time, begin to fester. In days past, this practice had enabled a type of massive communal meal that had been popular on noble estates in the demon realm. The estate lord would capture some 100 living people and would corral them in a structure like cattle, then send sours into their midst. Within 7 days, once the victims had sufficiently rotted, the doors could be opened. You could either let the people stumble out and eat them where they fell, or walk inside yourself and devour them on the spot. So Senior also knew about the demonic abominations that are sours, Qin Wanyue said politely. Luo Shishong guessed the identity of the culprit a while back. Just now, he explained the relevant information to us in detail. When she finished, she and all the other Huanhua disciples directed an adoring, longing gaze towards Luo Binghe, as if his face were emitting thousands of rays of golden light. Could this be the legendary, regardless of what the male lead says, everyone will feel their own IQ and knowledge get absolutely crushed by his words, protagonist halo of wisdom? Luo Binghe looked towards Shen Qingqiu and smiled. Everything I know was taught to me by Shizun. The most terrifying thing was that Shen Qingqiu got the feeling that Luo Binghe's face really was emitting a faint glow. Shen Qingqiu resolves to get out of there as soon as possible. He requests the corpse so that Mu Qingfang can study it and work on a cure. Luo Binghe readily agrees, saying, "Everything will be as Shizun says. This disciple will deliver the corpse promptly." Shen Qingqiu decides the way Luo Binghe says Shizun with a smile is nothing short of terrifying. He starts to make his way back to the weapon shop without another word. Gong Yizhao follows after him. Shen Qingqiu takes the time to ask him some questions. Turns out, Luo Binghe had been found by one of his shimei, injured on the banks of the Luo River just about a year ago. Because of his supposed death at the Immortal Alliance Conference, and upon Luo Binghe's request, the old palace master ordered all his disciples to keep Luo Binghe's return a secret. Luo Binghe wouldn't give a clear reason as to why he didn't want to return to Shangchong Mountain Sect. Instead, he wanted to wander around the world. The old palace master had grown very fond of him, and convinced him to stay. So, even though they didn't refer to each other as master and disciple, the old palace master treated Luo Binghe like a beloved successor. Shen Qingqiu feels bad that Gong Yizhao's position had been ousted by the protagonist in under a year. Because of Binghe's reluctance to speak on the topic, the Huanhua disciples had come to their own conclusions on why he wouldn't return to Shangchong Mountain Sect, the most outstanding being his former teacher. That explains their obvious disdain. Shen Qingqiu secretly praises Luo Binghe's ability to brainwash his new sect mates. Of course, it was so easy for him to convince them all to take him in, and he managed to thoroughly smear the good reputation Shen Qingqiu had been building since he transmigrated at the same time. Well, okay. Shen Qingqiu can admit that he did wrong Luo Binghe. He did push him into the abyss. There's no excusing that one, really. Seeing his expression, Gong Yizhao jumps to assure Shen Qingqiu that he doesn't believe the rumors like his sect siblings. He doesn't believe Senior Shen would ever be the type to purposely harm his own disciple. How cute! Shen Qingqiu thinks they can both sympathize with each other as fellow cannon fodder characters. They arrive at the weapon shop at just about the same time as the rest of the Huanhua party. Things are just as awkward as they were at the brothel. Shen Qingqiu catches Binghe scowling at him, talking to Gong Yizhao. But mostly, Luo Binghe just has this unreadable, generically polite smile on his face. He's keeping his awkward distance for now. There's a lot of noise at the shop now. Shen Qingqiu remembers that Lu Qingge set out to find patients for Mu Qingfang to examine. His shitty didn't even try to convince the townspeople to be examined. Nope. Lu Qingge did what Lu Qingge does and just captured them by force, resulting in the 10 burliest, most macho men left in the city being tied up and cursing by the forge. Shen Qingqiu leaves the Huanhua party to explain the situation to his martial siblings in the cellar. He explains the sour corpse they have, and that, due to the amount of victims, there must be other sours running around the city. He also briefly explains that Luo Binghe is back and with Huanhua Palace. He promises to explain in more detail when they have more time. Mu Qingfang agrees that the biggest priority should be to eradicate the sours. Lu Qingge is already headed out to hunt. Shen Qingqiu goes to follow them when, without a cure, flares up, because of course it does. No matter. Mu Qingfang says he will prepare his medicine. In the meantime, Shen Qingqiu is to wait for Lu Qingge to finish dealing with the sours so he can clear his meridians. Shen Qingqiu resigns to wait. He gives Lu Qingge some last-minute advice for dealing with the sours, mainly to avoid all direct contact with their skin, as they are highly infectious. And lastly, a bit desperately, he asks Lu Qingge to come find him as soon as he's finished, so he can tell him something important. Eventually, he leaves for the guest quarters he had been provided on the second floor of the weapon shop. Shen Qingqiu spends hours in his room full of anxiety and guilt, thinking of the cute White Lotus disciple he pushed into the endless abyss. Finally, there's a knock at the door. Shen Qingqiu answers the door, calling out to Lu Qingge as he goes, only, "Hello, Shizun." That's not Lu Qingge. Shen Qingqiu doesn't hesitate for a second, jumping, fleeing out the window. Luo Binghe jumps out right behind him. He has a pretty iconic line here. "During the day, Shizun is so intimate and gentle with Gong Yizhao, and this evening you lit a lantern, waiting for Lu Shishu late into the night. What sincere affection. Why then, are you so distant when it comes to this disciple?" As he chases his Shizun over rooftops. Remember, Shenjin-cho's room was on the second floor. He's parkouring as best he can, but also remember, his opponent is the protagonist, and the Without a Cure debuff is still going strong. As Binghe closes the gap, Shenjin-cho tries to play his trap card, yelling for Lu Qingge as loud as he can. But the protagonist, prepared for this, informs him that Lu Shushu is currently mid-battle. I'm afraid he doesn't have the leisure to come. Shizun, if you have orders, why not give them to me? Okay, warning. So, Lu Binghe is not doing great. There are reasons for that, but they aren't explained until a bit later. And there's a serious feedback loop going on here. Shenjin-cho avoiding Lu Binghe acting freakier to get his attention, Shenjin-cho getting more scared, Lu Binghe getting freakier, and so on and so on. Anyway, all of this to say, things are about to get rough. Lu Binghe, I love him, you love him, Neat Shen Yuan loves him, we all do. But he's about to go through his villain arc. It's hard to sugarcoat this one, folks. Lu Binghe is kind of the main antagonist in this chapter, and the next one. But I promise we will all get through this together. Lu Binghe catches Shenjin-cho by the neck and slams him into a wall, effectively ending their little moonlit foot chase. Shenjin-cho's stuck between a literal rock and hard place when the system finally decides to show itself again. Lu Binghe has 100 anger points. No easy mode for this one, but it offers him the use of a one-time special item, the fake Jane Guanyin. The item is good for the removal of 5,000 anger points from the protagonist. Shenjin-cho, of course, forgot all about the pendant in his system inventory. He almost uses it, but then the gamer in him protests. Would it be too wasteful to use it now? Lu Binghe has like 2% of the anger points it can potentially remove. A one-time use item is too valuable and needs to be used at the precisely right time. Besides, this might be a moment of life and death, but he's only at 100 anger points. Imagine how terrifying Binghe would be at 5,000. He shouldn't use it. Then again, if 100 anger points causes him to kill Shenjin-cho right here and now, there's no real point of not using it. He's about to grit his teeth and just use the item, if only to get the protagonist to stop choking him, when Binghe lets go on his own. Suddenly, he's back to staring at him with that creepy customer service smile. What follows is a conversation where not a single thing is communicated effectively by either party. Lu Binghe sighed. Why did Shizun run so fast? This disciple almost couldn't catch up. Bullshit. As if Lu Binghe hadn't just spent ages chasing him down in a game of cat and mouse, as if it were nothing. He wasn't even short of breath. Shenjin-cho panted, then gingerly opened his mouth, his voice a bit hoarse. You have quite some nerve, returning in such a grandiose fashion. Aren't you afraid someone will discover your true identity? Lu Binghe's eyes flashed. Is Shizun concerned or worried? Shenjin-cho thought this an interesting reply. In these circumstances, would there be any difference between concerned and worried? He couldn't resist asking. Unless you think I won't tell anyone? Lu Binghe looked at him, then said pityingly, Shizun, that would require someone to believe you. What are you planning to do with your return? Lu Binghe replied, I was merely reminiscing on how Shizun had treated me well, and I wanted to return to see you. Shenjin-cho automatically comprehended this as a declaration that Lu Binghe had come back to settle old debts. Just to kill me? Then what of the plague in Jinlan City? Has every resident of the city treated you well? Who could have expected that as soon as these words came out of his mouth, they would touch some sore spot inside of Lu Binghe? It was like a cold star had fallen within his eyes, and the faint hint of a smile on his face disappeared without a trace. Lu Binghe punches the wall next to Shenjin-cho's head hard enough to, quote, pulverize it. Shenjin-cho doesn't have enough spiritual energy to summon Juya, but he feels threatened enough to draw it manually. Without spiritual energy, he won't be able to use the weapon to its potential, but a sword's a sword. He won't be totally defenseless. Binghe gets even angrier seeing his teacher raise a weapon against him in desperation. He covers his arm in demonic energy. The threat is there. Both of them know that with that amount of demonic energy, he could easily shatter the unpowered Juya. Shenjin-cho raises the sword and prepares for the worst, when something changes in Lu Binghe's mind. He dissipates the demonic energy before grabbing the sword. Shen Qingqiu gets to experience cutting his disciple when he hadn't meant to for the second time, and he's shocked enough that it takes Luo Binghe almost no effort to fling the sword away. What changes Binghe's mind, you ask? Well, when Shen Qingqiu raised his sword, he exposed the red patches left by the sour poison on the back of his cursed hand.
Content warning for blood drinking.
Binghe does more grabbing and slamming. It's not great. Then he raises his hand, his still bleeding from Shen Qingqiu's sword hand, and brings it to cover Shen Qingqiu's mouth. Shen Qingqiu tries his best not to let any of the blood into his mouth, but with Binghe moving him around like a doll, he can't help it. Binghe sees the job done and lets him go. He tries to spit it out, but it's too late, and they both know it. Binghe feels satisfied to end their meeting there, leaving him with, "Shizun, don't spit it out. Even though a heavenly demon's blood is dirty, you won't necessarily die from drinking it, right?" In PIDW, one of Binghe's greatest weapons was the precise control he had over his blood. He could use the blood parasites to torture and harm, poison, track physical location, enhance sexual escapades. The possibilities were endless. Shen Qingqiu stumbles back into the weapon shop in a haze, crawls directly into bed, and sleeps fitfully for the rest of the night. The next morning, he gets the rundown on everyone else's night. 7 sours were caught, and Mu Jingfeng begins the distribution of his cure. With all the demons rounded up and the cure going out to the masses, the city gates could finally be opened once again. Cultivators were pouring into the city en masse, including leaders from all 4 major sects, Yue Qingyuan and the Old Palace Master among them. The sours were captured alive for questioning. Luo Qingge reveals that of the 7, he was only responsible for the capture of 2. The other 5 were all subdued by Luo Binghe. There's some posturing. Oh, this crisis was solved with the collaboration and camaraderie between the 4 major sects. Hooray for sect relations! Wow, Old Palace Master, what an upstanding young man you have there. The future of Huanhua Palace is bright. As the cultivation world's foremost scholar, Shen Qingqiu is asked for the best way to dispose of the sours. He replies that burning them would be the safest and quickest way to be rid of them. Some in attendance are reluctant to use such a barbaric method. Some even feel bad for the creatures, especially a particularly small sour, but ultimately they agree to burn them all quickly. And then things escalate in the blink of an eye. When they decide to burn them, the sours start calling out for Immortal Master Shen. They claim that they were only doing what he said, and they never agreed to die. Sangchang Mountain is like, this is so ridiculous. It's obvious that they're trying to frame him, but they underestimate the true stupidity of mob mentality. The Old Palace Master rallies up the crowd. Surely this needs to be investigated. It should just be a minor inconvenience if he really is innocent. And then, even more stuff starts happening when a woman emerges from the crowd. In PIDW, Chou Haitong was the last nail in Shen Qingqiu's coffin. She exposed the Scum villain's evil origins before joining the harem. She tells a pitiful tale of how, when she was a little girl, her family rescued a little boy called Xiao Zhou, Little Nine, from a group of slave traders. The family freed him and took him under their wing. They taught him to read and write, and eventually he grew close to the young mistress of the house. Xiao Zhou was Miss Haitong's favorite playmate. When he was 15, the masters of the house died, and the eldest son, Chou Jianlou, became the head of the household. Seeing the love his sister had for her childhood friend, he announced the 2 of them engaged. Chou Haitong was so happy, and it seemed like Xiao Zhou was too. She thought they had genuinely loved each other. Trouble came with a wandering cultivator into town. Xiao Zhou met him and was informed of his potential for cultivation, and all of a sudden, his quiet life at Chou Manor was no longer enough. Chou Haitong's world shattered when she woke up one night to her home on fire. Every male in the house, from the servants to her very own brother, were slaughtered by her fiancé. On top of that, the cultivator that had corrupted him was actually the evil demonic cultivator Wu Yangji. The man was vile and infamously criminal. He traveled, murdering and stealing as he went, and Xiao Zhou went willingly as his disciple. And now, all these years later, she finds the man who ruined her life sitting so high above his station as the Lord of Qingjing Peak. Ugh, that was a little painful for me to read as a real Shen Jiao stan. Please don't come for me. But don't worry, we get to see things from the supposed Scum villain's perspective later in the book. After she weaves her melodrama, the Old Palace Master is the first to speak up. With Chou Haitong's testimony, that makes 2 major accusations against Shen Qingqiu. Surely the great sects have an obligation to investigate. As an unbiased third party, the old palace master magnanimously offers to host the Qingjing Peak Lord until a proper trial can be arranged. Everyone there immediately knows he means the Huanhua Palace underground water prison, a dungeon holding some of the cultivation world's worst criminals in cages of acid. Needless to say, Shangcheng Mountain Sect is offended by the suggestion, especially Yue Qingyuan and Liu Qingge. Shen Qingqiu's a little touched at the change. In PIDW, none of the Scum Villain Sect siblings had anything to say in his defense. But then things start escalating again. Everyone is arguing. It's pure chaos, when suddenly there's a huge blast of spiritual energy. Yue Qingyuan has pulled his sword an inch out of its sheath. You see, Yue Qingyuan is one of, if not the most powerful cultivator of their generation. And a lot of it has to do with his sword, Xuansu. The sword has only been fully removed from its sheath twice since he pulled it from Wanjian Peak. Once was during their ascent to Peak Lords. He pulled the sword and presented it to his master when he passed on his title as sect leader. This is Sancho Mountain's tradition. The other time was during the subjugation of the heavenly demon Tianlan Jun, otherwise known as Liu Binghe's birth father, and the previous emperor of the demon realm. The sword is why it took a barrage of 10,000 arrows for PIDW Liu Binghe to take him down. And it's why exposing the blade a mere inch can be seen as Shangcheng Mountain Sect declaring war. The old palace master starts rallying his disciples into attack formations. When Shen Qingqiu decides he can't let things go on, Shen Qingqiu draws Shuya and drops it to the ground. A cultivator giving up their sword is the ultimate white flag of surrender. The gesture is enough to stop the fighting. He declares that he will go to the water prison willingly. His sect mates protest, but his mind is made up. The old palace master declares the trial will be in 1 month. Yue Qingyuan and Liu Qingge try to haggle it down. 5 days, 10 days, 7 days, no longer. Shen Qingqiu stops them again. 1 month, like the old palace master said. Longer imprisonment meant more torture and suffering in the water prison. But Shen Qingqiu needs as much time as possible for the sun moon dew mushrooms to grow. He hopes 1 month will be enough. With everything settled, Gong Yizhao comes to tie him with immortal binding cables, and the Qingjing Peak Lord is led away. And we finally finished the first chapter of Volume 2. I know that was super long, but I promise that one was by far the chunkiest one. But buckle up, things are going to get wild. Gong Yizhao has him put on a blindfold when they make it to the water prison. Huanhua has a complicated maze array in the halls of the prison to make it virtually impossible to escape from. That wouldn't be nearly as effective if their prisoners could observe the path through. While they walk, Gong Yizhao updates Shen Qingqiu. The sect went ahead and burned all the sours, as he suggested, and the corpses were sent to Zhaohua Monastery for cleansing rites to be done. At least that's taken care of. Binghe probably had no more use for them now that they've accused Shen Qingqiu. Yeah, avoiding any follow-up questioning works best for his plans. Gong Yizhao removes the blindfold when they make it to Shen Qingqiu's cell. There's a thin bridge leading to a round stone platform surrounded by corrosive green liquid. While the cell is open, they can cross the bridge. When the cell is closed, a curtain of the same acid falls from the ceiling, completely enclosing the platform. Shen Qingqiu tries his best to get comfortable. Well, as comfortable as he can be kneeling on cold hard stone, bound by 108 immortal binding cables, and surrounded by certain liquid death. It's gonna be a long month. Shen Qingqiu only knows he's fallen asleep when he's woken up, quite rudely, with a bucket of cold water thrown at him. It's the little palace mistress, the old palace master's heir, and who the original Liu Binghe marries in order to inherit Huanhua Palace. She's super bratty and annoying, and not anywhere near the top of Shen Yuan's Binghe harem tier list. She comes in to interrogate the prisoner, which is bullshit, because she's already decided he's scum. She has her signature barbed, refined iron whip with her, and she's out for revenge for her beloved Luo Guge, who's clearly hurting and won't lay his burdens on her because he's such a kind-hearted person, and Shen Qingqiu is the scum that threw him away. She whips at him over and over, but even though the whip is dangerous and Shen Qingqiu is bound with 108 cables, her skills are bad, and Shen Qingqiu is able to dodge. Missing the target just makes her angrier, and Shen Qingqiu is running out of room to dodge. His robes are the unfortunate victims as she corners him. When he runs out of room completely, he just shuts his eyes and waits for the inevitable. The pain never comes. Luo Binghe stands behind the little palace mistress, whip caught barbs and all, and he looks furious. Shenjincho is scared, but he's getting used to looking at the terrifying, angry face of the protagonist. The little palace mistress, not so much. Luo Binghe rips the whip out of her hands while she tries to explain that she was only doing it for him. Binghe dismisses her coldly, and she runs away in tears. A classic anime, "you idiot" scene. Shenjincho is just confused as he watches Luo Binghe toss the whip into the acid, destroying it. And now, it's time for terrible former student-teacher conversation number 2. Just like last time, they talk in circles and never get what the other actually means. Binghe asks why Shenjincho seems so sure he will be found guilty, and Shenjincho's like, yeah, if you want me to be guilty, then I'm gonna be guilty. And then Binghe is like, of course, I forgot that every evil in the world is my fault. Thank you for reminding me, Shizun. And Shenjincho's confused, so he asks Binghe why he's with Huanhua Palace now, and Binghe hits him with the, why should I answer if you won't believe me anyway? And Shenjincho's even more confused. Eventually Binghe asks, do you regret it? In reference to the Endless Abyss. Shenjincho regrets it a lot, but he doesn't say it. The system actually pops up at this point. It gives Shenjincho 3 options on how he can respond. Choice A is full of melodrama. Of course! There was never a moment I didn't regret it! Choice B is equally ridiculous, but in the other direction. Huh? Look at you now. What is there to regret? I'd do it again. Choice C is just to remain silent. And Shenjincho feels like there's really only one real option. Luo Binghe listens to his non-response before coming to his own conclusions. I already knew the answer, but I still asked Shizun. I'm so stupid. Shenjincho sees how every time he spoke, all he did was make Binghe more and more mad, even to the point where he seems a little sad. He concludes that silence is golden and doesn't say another word. Luo Binghe sees that his taunts for conversation aren't working anymore. Shizun won't even look at him while he talks. No matter, Luo Binghe has other ways to make him talk. Namely, his blood parasites that are still in Shenjincho's system. What follows isn't great. Luo Binghe does a little impromptu lecture, naming, then directing his blood to each of Shenjincho's organs. It hurts like it's supposed to. At one point, he's doubled over his stomach and he thinks, fuck, is this what period pains feel like? Well, I've never had heavenly demon blood punching my spleen, but maybe. The system chimes in and offers the fake Jade Guanyin again, but Luo Binghe's anchor points are only at 30 right now. What the fuck? Male menstruation is only worth 30 anger points? Cool. He turns it down, so it offers something new. A small scenario pusher. Shenjincho's pretty desperate, so fuck it, he selects it. At the same time, Binghe's decided he's had enough. He reaches to grab Shenjincho by the shoulder. Shenjincho instinctively flinches to the side. There's not enough room to fully dodge, so Luo Binghe has hold of the corner of his robes and... Right. The little palace mistress's whip had done a number on Shenjincho's robes. The lightest tug from the protagonist, and they gave up entirely. Both parties freeze in shock. One trapped prisoner, tied up, just had his clothes ripped off his body. The other just wanted his teacher to look at him, and now is getting an eyeful of his bare chest. As Luo Binghe backed away, the blood mites that had been writhing in Shenjincho's internal organs seemed to startle as well. They scattered like birds and beasts, and the sense of blockage in his blood vessels instantly disappeared. Shenjincho panted, his heart flooding with tears. His period was finally over. Now, how exactly does this small scenario pusher work? Does it just make me lose some of my clothes? Might as well call it small stripping assistant. What's the logic underlying the function? Does it just take advantage of Luo Binghe's physiological disgust upon seeing a man's half-naked body? Luo Binghe stood stiffly with his back turned for a while. He looked like he didn't know where to put his limbs. Without warning, he tugged off his outer robe at top speed and tossed it behind him. The robe hit Shenjincho full in the face. Shenjincho was speechless. What's the meaning of this? Shenjincho's hair stood on end. He lifted his arm, letting Luo Binghe's black robe slide from his shoulders. When he looked up, Luo Binghe had already turned around, and his eyes were blinding as they reflected the firelight. It seemed like he was in a fury. The veins on the back of his hands popped, his fingers clenching and unclenching several times. Then, as if trying to vent his rage, he fired off a succession of spiritual blasts. He was, in fact, launching these attacks with no target at all. A few hit the surface of the lake, striking waves of water high into the air. Another hit the wall of the cave, opening a giant crater. Luo Binghe carefully drew back. I almost forgot. Shizun dislikes anything demon race has touched. The oh-so-mighty male lead had given up protecting his image to throw a tantrum for no reason. How is this any different from a little child kicking all their toys all over the place when they don't get their way? You're cutting your own ratings, really. A perfectly good cave and its perfectly good walls were chock full of holes before Luo Binghe finally finished raging. He turned to find Shen Qingqiu still observing him, unperturbed. A vein seemed to jump a few times in Luo Binghe's temple, and he forced out through gritted teeth. In a month, I want to watch every step of your fall from grace with my own eyes. Having thrown down these words, Luo Binghe swept his sleeves and stalked away, slamming a hand onto the mechanism as he exited the cave. With a rumble, the water curtain poured back down. Okay, so I need everyone to remember this scene in the water prison. I'm really jumping ahead here, but I can't help it. SVSSS Volume 4, for the English editions, is just a collection of all the extra stories MXTX wrote in this world after the main storyline finishes. In one of these extras, Binghe casually mentions that this scene in the water prison is what he considers to be their first date. Oh, Bing Bing, you will never outrun the freak allegations. Shen Qingqiu leaves Binghe's robes on the ground for a long time, but eventually the natural chill of the prison combined with his state of undress as well as the fact that he's still soaking wet from the little palace mistress's rude awakening, Shen Qingqiu gives in and wraps it around himself like a blanket. Shen Qingqiu's next visitor is Gong Yizhao the next day.
Content warning for assumed sexual assault.
He wanted to check on Senior Shen after Luo Binghe stormed out of the water prison in a rage the day before. He wasn't prepared for this. Shen Qingqiu, of course, has no idea what he looks like. Gong Yizhao sees Senior Shen shivering under Luo Binghe's outer robes, his own robe torn to shreds, a vacant look in his eye, and a smattering of barely faded bruises. There's also evidence of violence all over the cell, holes in stone, marks from whips. Gong Yizhao comes to his own conclusions on what happened to Senior Shen under Huanhua's watch. It's much worse than he imagined. A little later, he gives Shen Qingqiu his own outer robes, so that he doesn't have to keep wearing the one of he who disgraced him. Gong Yizhao eventually remembers the other reason he came to the water prison. That morning, Peak Lord Shang Qinghua had requested access to the water prison. The old palace master denied him. No one was to visit the prisoner except for Luo Binghe. As a second option, he gave Gong Yizhao an encrypted letter to sneak in and deliver. Gong Yizhao couldn't read it, but he wanted to help Senior Shen, so he brought it. Shen Qingqiu, for his part, nearly spits blood when he opens the letter. It was encrypted all right. The entire thing was written in a shit-tier amalgamation of Chinese pinyin and English. The letter reads as follows. For Peerless Cucumber's eyes only. Everything is set, and the preparations are complete. The location has not changed. It's just there was a small mishap with the time. In order to make the sun moon dew mushrooms mature as soon as possible, I fixed up a little something to promote its maturation. But I accidentally overdid it. Right now, it's as mature as it will ever get, and it will rot in no more than a week. So I hope you can leave Huanhua Palace's water prison as soon as possible. Don't worry, it was only a bit of something like chemical fertilizer, so there shouldn't be any difference when you use the mushroom. Probably. Airplane Bros' makeshift fertilizer worked, but now their plans have shifted from trying to stall as long as possible to a race against the clock. Shen Qingqiu needs to get out of here now. They toss the letter into the acid. Shen Qingqiu asks Gong Yizhao to help him escape. He even promises to return to the water prison after he finishes what he has to do. Gong Yizhao is hesitant at first, but if what he thinks happened to Senior Shen happened, he has to help. He leaves Shen Qingqiu and returns an hour later with Shuya in hand, freshly stolen from where the old palace master kept it, and frees Shen Qingqiu from the immortal binding cables in one slash. There's another hiccup. The water prison has an extra layer of security. If a cell is supposed to be occupied, the acid curtain will not lift unless one person stays on the platform. Now it's Shen Qingqiu's turn to leave. He assures Gong Yizhao that he'll be right back and goes out, knocks out the first guard he sees, and drags him back to the cell. Now, Gong Yizhao is free to lead the pair out of the water prison. They sneak out. Thankfully, with everyone but Luo Binghe banned from entering, they have a pretty good amount of time before anyone notices the escape. They don't stop until they've successfully walked through Bailu Forest and out of Huanhua territory. Shen Qingqiu thanks Gong Yizhao for accompanying him and urges him to sneak back to Huanhua while he has the chance. No alarms have sounded as of yet. He tells him that he plans to head to Huayue City, and if Gong Yizhao heads there within the next week, he should be able to find him. They part. May we meet again. Okay, let's talk about Gong Yizhao a little bit. I love his character. He's upright and righteous despite his sect. He's like Binghe that never fell into the abyss. It's so unfortunate that he's constantly replaced by the protagonist. His head discipleship, his childhood friend. In PIDW, Gong Yizhao is said to be close to the little palace mistress, but she leaves him for Luo Binghe. Good, honestly, he can do better. Gong Yizhao is kind, and he falls for kindness. Senior Shan won him over when he showed mercy to that ugly creature in the cave in Bailu Forest, and he can't stand the way Senior Shan is being treated right now. He even goes against his own sect to do what he felt was right. But fuck Huanhua, honestly. I've been trying not to talk about it, but we all see the old palace pervert over there, right? I know I've read the rest of the book, and I know all the shit that happens later, but even now, this dude has a crazy track record of taking the young, pretty cultivators under his wing. The moment he saw Binghe at the Immortal Alliance conference, he was trying to arrange a disciple exchange. Dude, creepy. He's the nastiest skank I've ever met. Do not trust him. Anyway, Gong Yizhao, they can never make me hate you. And if y'all out there feel the same, maybe we can all just pretend that this is the last time I will ever mention him. We can all just wave him off on his walk back through the Bailu Forest. We can imagine a spin-off series where Gong Yizhao is the protagonist, and we see him on his adventures, fixing Huanhua Palace to be as righteous as him. Maybe we can see him take up the offer of studying at Qingjing Peak for a while. Yeah. Anyways, let's get back to the story. Shen Qingqiu flew for a while, but in order to remain undetected, walked to Huayue City without rest, and arrived the following night. Huayue City was a major city in the Central Plains. Case in point, there was a festival in full swing when he finally made it in. Among the crowds, there were tons of cultivators. Shen Qingqiu sees a good number of festival attendees wearing demon masks, so he buys one before the cultivators can get close enough to see his face. And it's a good thing, too. He overhears some from a smaller sect talking about the massive bounty the old palace master put on his head. They also mention some great tragedy that befell Huanhua during his escape. Huh, weird. Shen Qingqiu used stealth and an inside man to escape prison. Knocking out a single disciple could hardly be called a great tragedy. Oh well, leave it to Huanhua to be dramatic. Shen Qingqiu pushes himself away from the cultivators through the festival crowds. At one point, a little boy runs into his legs. The poor kid is lost. Shen Qingqiu has a total soft spot for kids. He picks him up and asks who he came with so that he can help find them. The kid says he's here with his Shizun, and oof. That one hurt a little. Maybe it's pity, maybe it's guilt, but Shen Qingqiu just pats the kid on the head and asks for more information. Where did you get lost? Do you remember? I remember. Shizun personally threw me down in cell, so how could I not? It's not just Shen Qingqiu who freezes. All the festival attendees, in a second, turn to face him and froze in place. Fuck. He's dreaming. The kid disappears from his arms and ages up. It's clearly Binghe now, younger than he was when Shen Qingqiu first transmigrated, but still recognizable. Shen Qingqiu bolts. Damn it! He's on the run. He shouldn't have been so stupid as to fall asleep, especially not with Luo Binghe, dream manipulator extraordinaire, on his case. He keeps running and running. Teenaged, White Lotus disciple Binghe grabs his arm. He shakes him off, distinctly aware that attacking anything in the dreamscape will only be harm done to himself. The street is endless, so he ducks into a shop. Only now, he's in a cave. Damn dream logic. Well, more like nightmare logic.
Content warning for depictions of self-harm and injury.
The further he walks into the cave, the more he can hear the sounds of someone close to death. He uses a ball of qi to light his way to a familiar cavern, and there's Luoqinge. In the midst of qi deviation, Luoqinge raises his sword, flips it around, and plunges it into his own body. Then he does it again and again. Shen Qingqiu doesn't think before lunging forward to stop him. Luo Qingge freezes like the festival attendees, and Shen Qingqiu feels a new presence behind him. He spins around, and there's Yue Qingyuan, his head down, but Shen Qingqiu can still meet his gaze, his cold, empty gaze. And why wouldn't it be? The sect leader's arms, legs, chest, back, not a single part of his body remains unpierced by arrows. 10,000 arrows. Shen Qingqiu is seeing their canon deaths. Deaths caused at the hands of Shen Qingqiu. He decides he'd rather face hundreds of faceless people outside than this, and he bolts back the way he came. His mind was a mess, his footsteps confused as he tripped and staggered along, cutting a rather sorry figure. Every person on the street watched him in deathly silence, and while he was disoriented, he crashed headlong into someone's chest. That person's hands swiftly came around to his back, gathering him into their arms. The other party was a little taller than him, slender and willowy, dressed in clothes as black as ink that exposed only a fair neck. Above that, a sinister mask covered their face. Shen Qingqiu hadn't yet spoken when a smiling voice came from above. "Shizun, be careful." He had no need to lift the mask to know whose face lay underneath. At once, Shen Qingqiu began to struggle. The other party didn't hold him by force, so getting free wasn't difficult. Only after retreating several steps and maintaining a safe distance did he right himself. "You created this city?" Shen Qingqiu asked. Luo Binghe casually removed the mask. His expression looked like he was sad that they couldn't keep playing hide and seek. "Correct. What does Shizun think?" Shen Qingqiu slowly nodded. "You truly deserve to be called Mengmo's succeeding disciple." Originally, Luo Binghe's mood had seemed rather good, but on hearing these words, the smile on his lips faded. "I am not Mengmo's disciple." "Didn't you accept him as your master?" Shen Qingqiu asked, slightly curious. Luo Binghe held his silence for a while before he answered in a peeved tone. "I didn't." Alright then, if he didn't, he didn't. Shen Qingqiu didn't think there was any point in wasting time on this. "Shizun, if you are willing to return of your own volition, you can ask for anything," Luo Binghe said. "Are you offering a plea bargain?" asked Shen Qingqiu. "So long as I don't dissolve the blood mites within your body, it will be futile to flee." "Oh, is that so?" he smiled. "Then right now, why haven't you personally come to catch me?" Luo Binghe stiffened, sparks flashing in his eyes. At this reaction, Shen Qingqiu became even more sure. "Something has gone wrong with that sword of yours, right?" he asked, languidly. "The heavens smile down on me." The Endless Abyss arc in PIDW was brutal. Endless fights, danger at every turn. The only reason Binghe didn't die was because of his OP Heavenly Demon healing abilities. And the only way he escaped was when he discovered his ultimate golden finger, the demon sword Jinmo, Heart Demon. Created by a master blacksmith, the sword was mythical in its power, but it was too volatile to wield. All of its owners, without fail, no matter their talent or skill, were corrupted and killed by the sword's powerful evil spirit. That is, until it was picked up by the protagonist. Jinmo was Luo Binghe's ultimate weapon. A single slash could tear through reality itself. Luo Binghe only had to step through and leave the Endless Abyss. He was already of the most powerful bloodline of demons, but with that sword, taking over the demon world became child's play. It was with the power of Jinmo that the demon emperor Luo Binghe was able to merge the three realms. But even with all the plot armor in the world, even Luo Binghe couldn't escape the sword's backlash, but he could control it. How? With copious amounts of dual cultivation, of course. And thus, Great Master Airplane justified the protagonist's obnoxiously large harem. No matter that a good number of his harem were just regular mortals and couldn't absorb demonic energy, neither could they send him cleansing spiritual energy like cultivators. He would just be killing those women if the world had even an ounce of logic and, God forbid, actually remained consistent to its own lore. And then there's all his demon wives. Dual cultivation with them, according to Airplane's rules, would just pump the protagonist with more demonic energy. Wouldn't that just make things worse? Sorry about that. Peerless Cucumber took over there for a second. Where were we? Oh yeah. It's time for fruitless Shizun Binghe conversation number 3, Dream World Edition. This one's pretty short. Shen Qingqiu didn't notice when he started dreaming, so naturally he was wearing the same clothes as in the waking world, namely Gong Yizhao's outer robe. This offended Luo Binghe a lot, so he does the reasonable thing and rips the robe off of Shen Qingqiu. Shen Qingzhou really hopes these clothes-ripping tendencies don't become a thing, and more so, that he stops targeting Shen Qingzhou in particular. The two start fighting. Well, Shen Qingzhou is fighting. He feels like Luo Binghe is just playing with him. He fights harder. Eventually, Shen Qingzhou slips and falls right into Luo Binghe's arms. Binghe teases him. Shizun taught me this maneuver himself. When it comes to force, there is a time for restraint and a time for release, and one must, above all else, avoid losing one's balance. How could you forget that yourself? Oh, motherfucker. Shen Qingzhou did teach him that. He's hit with a flashback of personal training sessions he had hosted for Binghe before the Immortal Alliance conference. Binghe was so talented. With proper training, he should have been picking up skills by the buckets, and for the most part he was, except when it came to sparring with his master. They'd fight, and then, without fail, Binghe would use too much force before slipping and falling right into Shen Qingzhou's arms. No matter how many times he'd lectured Binghe, he kept doing it, and now the tables have turned. Was Binghe faking it during training? Clearly he knows how to do it now. Oh, Shen Qingzhou is mad. Luo Binghe picks more of Shen Qingzhou's tattered robes off. Why was he so offended by Gong Yizhao's outer robe? Binghe goes off about how his master is so disgusted by him that even his outer robe is offensive. Why does he keep saying that? Binghe tells him that he needn't think about Gong Yizhao anymore. And Shen Qingzhou's like, why? What happened? In PIDW, Luo Binghe eventually exiles Gong Yizhao to the borderlands when he takes over Huanhua Palace. But it's way too early for that. Has the plot skipped ahead? Binghe doesn't answer. And now that Shen Qingzhou looks around, the dreamscape is losing integrity. Jinmo must be causing Luo Binghe trouble. This is Shen Qingzhou's chance. He just needs to confront and conquer one of the illusions the dreamscape shows him, and then he can break out. He goes into the first shop he sees. The doors closed behind him, and it was like the clamor outside had been severed by a sharp knife. Within a split second, it was all deathly silent. Shen Qingzhou held his breath and waited, soundless. After a long while, it was as if someone had lit a candle, and his surroundings slowly, flickeringly lightened. Shen Qingzhou looked down and came face to face with a countenance that was both foreign and familiar. Before him knelt a frail-looking youth. The boy wore coarse clothes and was crouched, bent over on the ground. It was a crestfallen pose, and his hands were tightly tied with a thick, rough rope. Though his face was deathly pale, his eyes were full of life. Shen Qingzhou met his gaze, unwavering. This, categorically, wasn't Shen Qingzhou's memory, but this face was indeed exactly like his. This was Shen Qingzhou, yet it wasn't Shen Qingzhou. If he had to be obvious about it, this was Shen Jiu. Shen Qingzhou abruptly sat up on a wooden slab. After startling awake, he took in his surroundings, and only then did he realize that he was lying within an abandoned residence. Now awake again, Shen Qingzhou can remember what happened. He wandered through the festival when he first arrived last night. He found an abandoned house and only meant to sit down for a bit, but he was careless and fell asleep. Oh well, nothing to do about it now. He knew it wouldn't take Luo Binghe long to catch up with him. He'd been fantasy air-tagged by heavenly demon blood after all. But let's talk about the dreamscape. That dream was wild. The original Shen Qingzhou's memories must have been locked away somewhere by the system and started bleeding out. How else would Shen Qingzhou be seeing them? Le Qingge and Yue Qingyuan's deaths in the novel. Okay, well that sounds like something the system would use to torture him. File that one away with the visions of human stickism Shen Qingzhou had already suffered through. Although, Lu Qingge's death seemed to be way more self-inflicted than PIDW ever implied. Was that what happened when the Scum villain found him chi-deviating? If so, why did he never defend himself against the accusations? And then there was the original's childhood memory. That one was a surprise. Shen Qingzhou initially thought he was looking at a memory from his time with the human traffickers, but the room was too nice. It looked like the study of a rich young master, full of all kinds of expensive stuff. Maybe Chou Haitang's recount of events wasn't the whole truth. Something to think about. In the daytime, there are a lot more cultivators around. No doubt looking to collect the bounty on Shen Qingzhou's head. Uh-oh. Shen Qingzhou took off Gong Yizhao's robe, if only to avoid it being ripped off of him again. Then, to disguise himself further, he rubs a bunch of dirt on his face. He adds a bit more to the bottom of his face to imitate a 5 o'clock shadow. Side note, Shen Qingzhou is really not great at disguises. Dirt facials are kind of his MO. There's a flash of white, and then, oh shit, there's Lu Chinga. Score. Shen Qingqiu's about to head over to his shitty when he's distracted by a commotion and yelling. It's Ning Ying and Ming Fan, and the little palace mistress. Shen Qingqiu can't resist seeing Ning Ying and the little palace mistress go head-to-head, and Ming Fan's there too. PIDW featured many a verbal spar between wives. It's cool to see in real life. Only, isn't something wrong here? They're fighting, just not over the attention of their future husband, but over Shen Qingqiu's honor of all things. Ning Ying is kind of savage too. Gone is the ditzy sweet girl. This Ning Ying is truly worthy of being called the Scum villain's favorite. The little palace mistress doesn't stand a chance. Ming Fan has some good barbs too. But the little palace mistress got a new whip, and shit's escalating fast. The little palace mistress was the old palace master's beloved daughter. Her martial skills were the product of his hands-on teaching, and her weapons were far from ordinary in quality. Meanwhile, Ning Ying was the beloved youngest Shimei, who was pampered by the entirety of Qingjing Peak. She very rarely encountered danger, and had virtually no real battle experience. Her sword waved back and forth, and though she warded off the attacks, a keen eye could see she was having trouble. For his part, Ming Fan wanted to aid her, but he couldn't get past the circle of the Iron Whip's dance and could only fret helplessly. Shen Qingqiu assessed the situation, then casually plucked a green leaf from the flower pot by his foot, which he sent flying. The fragile green leaf was filled with spiritual energy. When it collided with the Iron Whip, there was a piercing crash of something hard on metal. The little palace mistress was unable to see what had gone wrong, but she felt the space between her fingers and thumb go numb before her whip slipped from her hand and flew away. Ning Ying was also startled. She had been about to meet another attack with her sword, but once she saw the little palace mistress had no weapon with which to block, she hurriedly pulled back, afraid of really stabbing her. But the little palace mistress had no similar mercy. Her reaction was supremely fast. The second her weapon left her hand, she reversed the momentum of her arm to turn it into a slap. Ning Ying held her face, her head turned to the side. Who the fuck are you? Trying to teach my disciples in my place? Shen Qingqiu was trying to figure out how to teach the little palace mistress a lesson without inciting greater bloodshed or exposing his location as quickly as possible, when he suddenly noticed that within the crowd of Huanhua disciples, one person was behaving most strangely and suspiciously. Shen Qingqiu observed that person for a few seconds, after which his heart thumped. Not good, he thought silently. It would no longer be so easy to slip away. So, the tavern has dissolved into an all-out brawl. That one Huanhua disciple is just standing suspiciously in the corner, and Shen Qingqiu starts chasing a cat, I guess? Don't want the little guy to get stepped on, I get it. Anyway, everything is chaotic. Shen Qingqiu weaving in between both parties, trying to catch the cat. At the same time, the mysterious Huanhua cultivator is also making their way to the center of the chaos. Ning Ying and Ming Fan were raised right. They see these two people entering the fray and are pulling back their attacks. The last thing they want to do is hurt an innocent bystander. The little palace mistress, on the other hand, couldn't give less of a shit. The battle halts when two loud slaps ring out. The little palace mistress is clutching both cheeks, the slaps delivered with far more force than the one she gave Ning Ying. Meanwhile, Shen Qingqiu has finally caught the cat, right in the middle of the bystanding Huanhua disciples. Naturally, the little palace mistress immediately accuses Ning Ying of slapping her. Ning Ying is confused and denies it. Then the Huanhua group stay predictable and accuse Shen Qingqiu. Not that they recognize him, they just see a dirty, homeless-looking dude standing among them. Shen Qingqiu's quick to counter by directing their attention to the actual perp, the shady guy in Huanhua robes. Seeing things about to turn for the worst, Shen Qingqiu, armed with leaves, jumps between the disciples and the mystery guy. At the same time, the mystery guy finally reveals himself, ripping off his cloak to reveal red skin. A sour. He yells at everyone to get out and kicks the sour away. Ning Ying recognizes him immediately and calls out to him, blowing his cover. Damn. The sour is lunging again. Shen Qingqiu moves Ning Ying out of the way and goes to blast the sour with a fire technique. But, like a lighter out of fluid, nothing happens. Without a cure, rears its ugly head. Just his luck. The sour grabs onto Shen Qingqiu's leg, and just like that, he's infected again. Fuck! Shen Qingqiu is so mad that the rage forces the qi through his meridians and the sour bursts into flames. He helps Ning Ying up and is immediately swamped with teary-eyed Qingjing disciples crying how much they missed him. It can't be helped. He wipes off the dirt from his face the best he can. Before he can say anything to them, his danger senses go off, and he's drawing Shuya to block the little palace mistress's whip. She yells accusations. How dare you! You will pay for the lives of my martial siblings! Shen Qingqiu initially thinks she's talking about the people who died at the Immortal Alliance conference. But then she name drops the guy he knocked out during his escape. Shen Qingqiu argues that his escape was entirely peaceful, and Gong Yizhao can attest. Then the little palace mistress drops the most devastating news. Gong Yizhao is dead. I know. And off screen, too. He deserves so much better. And it's not just Gong Yizhao. Every disciple stationed near or around the water prison is dead. Shen Qingqiu doesn't know about you, but this stinks of the protagonist trying to destroy whatever remains of his reputation. Seriously? Did his departure enrage Luo Binghe enough that he took it out on his new sex siblings? Shen Qingqiu is caught completely off guard. His shocked reaction is enough to convince the Qingjing disciples that he didn't have anything to do with it after all. Unfortunately, I don't think anything could convince Huanhua Palace. Also, all the commotion has drawn a huge crowd of cultivators. Shen Qingqiu can practically see the money signs in their eyes when they look at him. Looks like it's time to go. Shen Qingqiu takes off for the rooftops, calling for Liu Qingge as he does. Someone flew up on their sword and angrily denounced him. Shen Qingqiu, your heart is truly wicked. You purposefully fled to the city, drawing people from various sects here. Was it so you could collude with demons and, in one fell swoop, reenact the tragedy of the Immortal Alliance conference? Whatever it takes, our Bai Qi sect won't let you succeed. So, any and all accusations are perfectly acceptable, huh? Shen Qingqiu wasn't even in the mood to rant. Then, from the east, came the hiss of a sword glare, followed by a person in white who arrived on a sword fast as lightning. Mind you, his descent was too forceful, pointedly whipping up a powerful wind that threw the Bai Qi cultivator right off his own blade. Liu Qingge stood securely on Cheng Luan with his arms crossed. What is it? Too reliable, Great Master Liu. Shen Qingqiu said with all sincerity, Get me out of here. Liu Qingge stared. My poison flared up again, and I can't summon the qi to fly my own sword. If you don't take me, I'll just plummet from the skies. Liu Qingge let out a sigh. Get on. Where to? Asked Liu Qingge. To the roof of the tallest building in the city, said Shen Qingqiu. After that, please help me hold off these people. What exactly is up with you? If you didn't wish to be imprisoned, why didn't you say so earlier? You've made things so troublesome. Besides, even if Sangchang Mountain couldn't navigate the water prison, couldn't we have just destroyed it? There was no need to destroy the water prison. Get off. I'm only saying there was no need. I'm still grateful for your kindness, so surely there's no need to throw me down. Something's coming. Shen Qingqiu didn't say another word and jumped off at once. The tip of his foot touched tile, and he stooped over on the roof of the building. Cheng Luan's momentum was incredibly powerful. Liu Qingge and his sword did a dazzling somersault in midair, and only then did he manage to break, eyes fixed attentively elsewhere. Shen Qingqiu also followed his gaze. Then he heard a sneer behind him. Where are you looking? Luo Binghe glared fixedly at them, expression dark, then slowly extended a hand to Shen Qingqiu. Come with me. Oh boy, Luo Binghe's here. And we don't even get to celebrate the arrival of the Liu Qingge Uber. The Liuber, if you will. Now, you and I might remember that there's a ton of disciples here from tons of different sects. But between Luo Binghe and Liu Qingge, they're all like little ants and really stop mattering, except to serve as the live studio audience for what is about to happen next. And a lot happens next. Shen Qingqiu is actually angry enough to accuse Luo Binghe right to his face. Gong Yizhao didn't deserve to die. Luo Binghe's eyes get redder. Whatever, you won't believe me regardless of what I say, he said icily. Then there's no need for more pointless chatter. I'll ask again, will you come or not? Shen Qingqiu will not. Liu Qingge pushes Shen Qingqiu out of the way of the next blast. He tells him to go ahead. He'll hold off Luo Binghe. Shen Qingqiu's a little worried. He hasn't forgotten Luo Qingge lost 2-5 to Luo Binghe collecting sours in Jinlan City, but without a cure acting up, there's not much he can do. He leaves the two powerhouses to duke it out while he climbs to the highest point of the building. Luo Qingge and Luo Binghe are evenly matched. Each of their blows sends out enough energy to knock lesser cultivators off their feet. But they're only even because Luo Binghe has yet to draw Jinmao. Probably because his cultivation is not completely stable. Drawing Jinmao runs the risk of the sword corrupting and controlling his mind and spirit. This Luo Binghe clearly hasn't established any kind of dual cultivation partners yet. And isn't he kind of late on that? And then he does it. Jinmao is freed from Luo Binghe's back. Luo Qingge sends his sword flying at Luo Binghe. The moment he reaches back to draw his sword, there's an opening. But it's no use. Jinmao stops Cheng Yuan dead in its tracks. This has never happened to the Baijian war god before. To say Luo Qingge is shocked is an understatement. Shen Qingqiu is shocked too. Well, more like panicked. He knows that if Jinmao's backlash hits now, every cultivator watching, no, every person in a 50-kilometer radius is as good as dead. As a last resort, Shen Qingqiu draws Shuya and challenges Luo Binghe directly. It's time to end this. Okay, pause. I'm sorry I keep doing this. Actually, I'm not sorry. Shit's getting crazy and I need y'all to be prepared. This scene is by far the most important moment of Volume 2. Arguably, it's the most important moment in all of SVSSS as a whole. It certainly is the perfect halfway point in the story. And not for nothing, but if, say, someone wrote an SVSSS jukebox musical using all Taylor Swift songs, and they called it the Scum Villains Jukebox Musical System, parentheses Taylor's version, this would be the perfect scene for the Act 1 finale. A nice spot for intermission, you know? God, y'all, there's no cure for this. Anyway, as I was saying before the brain rot took over, I got to this scene, and just like the Endless Abyss scene, I was really racking my brain on how to do it justice without just reading the whole thing. And this one's harder, I think, because of all the super iconic lines of dialogue.
User UV003 is writing extremely canon-compliant fanfiction.
Well, the only way out is through. It's time to do this thing. Okay, is everyone ready? The status quo is about to change, so buckle up. Shen Qingqiu draws his sword. Let's resolve everything today. Binghe laughs at him. Ha! You think it's so easy. But it is easy. Shen Qingqiu read the book. This is their fate. Luo Binghe has an issue with fate. Was it fate for him to bury his mother? Was it fate that he should fight dogs for food? Was it fate for the person he wholeheartedly adored to lie to him, abandon him, betray him, and personally shove him into a place worse than purgatory? And all that time in the abyss, throughout all that suffering, all he wanted to know was why. Why did Shen Qingqiu do that? Why couldn't he even plead his case before his Shizun deemed him guilty? Throughout all of this, Binghe's energy is getting more and more unstable. It's getting to be too much. What do you think, Shizun? You wanted me to be strong. Am I strong enough? Shen Qingqiu has a single moment of peace. He turns to look at the sky. He actually made things worse, didn't he? He thought by showing Binghe love and care, he could stop his heart from blackening. But look at him. The original never expected anything but scum from his teacher. Of course he pushed him into the abyss. But his Binghe? He's hurt him badly. Really hearing his student talk for the first time brings tears to his eyes. Things keep getting worse. It's now or never. Shen Qingqiu keeps his voice soft. Don't let it overpower your mind. Jinmao is taking over. It's all too much. Luo Binghe can't control it. Everything hurts, and then someone embraces him. Cool, clean, spiritual energy floods his system. Jinmao loses hold. Shuya shatters. A shattering sword is a telltale sign of a cultivator's death. Shen Qingqiu sways where he stands. For all that has passed, I repay you today. And he topples off the building. Shen Qingqiu self-detonated his golden core. The surge of energy was enough to stop Jinmao, but now Shen Qingqiu's body is nothing but an empty husk. He's dead before he hits the ground. Not that he ever does, with Luo Binghe close enough to catch him. They land in a crowd of cultivators. Ning Yingying is the first to approach. Shen Qingqiu is dead. Even Ming Fan's eyes are red as he rallies the other Qingjing disciples to avenge their master. Because he's dead. Liu Shishu stops them. He can't defeat Luo Binghe, and neither can they. Their Shizun wouldn't want them to throw away their lives so pointlessly. Shizun can't want anything anymore. Isn't this too sad? He'll never get the chance to defend himself in trial now. And isn't that his beloved disciple? Didn't he mourn every day at the sword mound he erected for that disciple? Shizun is gone. Ning Yingying speaks up again. She's confused. She's heartbroken. She reminds Luo Binghe that even back when his treatment on Qingjing was the worst, it was Shizun's leaves that stopped the beatings after the bullies stole his pendant. No one else could use Shizun's signature technique, so how can he say that he was so mistreated? Shizun, I'm sorry. Ning Yingying ends it saying, my words end here. If Shizun really did wrong you in some way, and you can't under any circumstances forgive him, then at least today he finally repaid it all, right? At this point, she couldn't take it anymore and turned her head away. I ask that you stop calling him Shizun. Shizun repaid me? That's right. Moments ago, Shizun had said something about repaying him. Had Shen Qingqiu been saying that in exchange for pushing Luo Binghe into the endless abyss, he would also fall for his sake? Luo Binghe started to panic. I didn't want you to repay me. I just couldn't get over my anger. He was speaking to himself. I couldn't get over it. Whenever you saw me, you acted like you'd seen a ghost. Then you would happily smile and laugh with others, when in the past you only did that with me. And to me, you would only say the bare minimum to me. And you kept suspecting me of everything, but I was wrong. He stammered and stuttered, talking as he wiped the blood away from Shen Qingqiu's face. You disdained me for being a demon, so I was afraid that if I returned directly to Sangchang Mountain, you'd throw me out. I thought that if I took over Huanhua Palace and became like you, a leader of righteous cultivators, I could maybe make you happy. Luo Binghe's voice trembled. Shizun, I really... All right, curtains down, intermission time. It's time to hear a word from our sponsor. Okay, I'm just kidding. I don't have a sponsor. That would be ridiculous. I don't, but the SVSSS Donghua did. Aha! Did you think that just because the Donghua ran out of content halfway through Volume 1 that I was going to be done talking about it? Of course not. So, if you've seen any other Donghua, you might have noticed the characters stopping to eat ice cream or ramen or whatever, ads involving the actual characters. Scum Villain has the same. Is it for cornettos? Of course not. The scene opens. Shen Qingqiu is leaving the lecture hall, Ning Yingying behind him. She tells him that she doesn't want to go with him because it would be too embarrassing. Then Shen Qingqiu goes, it looks like your period is giving you too much trouble. Let me get you something small and cute. And then he channels his spiritual energy to summon a box of pads. She's like, wow, thanks Shizun, it's so cute. Can you make it even cuter? And he can. He waves his hand again and the box turns into a kitten. She names the kitten Little Cute and she's very happy with her new friend. Binghe walks out. He's jealous that Ning Yingying got Little Cute from Shizun. Shen Qingqiu soothes him with a pat on the head and some wise words. It's tough out there for female cultivators. And that's the SVSSS ad for Kotex Pocket Sanitary Napkins. Really, what could be said about such a masterpiece? Shen Qingqiu was just talking about his own period in the water prison. He could have used Little Cute. Anyways, let's get back to the angst. The Borderlands is the place where the boundaries between the human world and the demon world are the weakest. Residents of either world could find themselves slipping into the other. As such, not many people lived in the Borderlands. And of them, many found themselves evacuating from time to time, leaving behind only the sorry cultivators to guard the place. Lu Liu worked as a barkeep in the Borderlands. He pours wine for someone new. He's from the south. Things must be rough down there, with 2 of the 4 great sects battling, bad enough that the traveler would come to the Borderlands. One of his regulars seems confused, so Lu Liu explains. Huanhua's new leader is a former disciple from Sangcheng, Luo Binghe. He was even head disciple of Qingjing Peak. Then, after the Immortal Alliance conference, he disappeared. His master said that he had died, so it was shocking when he suddenly reappeared 3 years later, as head disciple of Huanhua Palace no less. Then, he forced his former master, Shen Qingqiu, to self-detonate in Huayue City. Then, Sancheng's Anding Peak Lord defected to the demon world, and at the same time, Huanhua's old palace master went into seclusion, and Luo Binghe took over the sect. What's more is that Luo Binghe refused to return Shen Qingqiu's corpse to Sancheng, but surely they can take it back by force. They have the war god of Baijian after all, another regular says. Luo Liu shakes his head. You didn't know? Liu Qingge has fought Luo Binghe countless times for his martial brother, but he loses every time. And if that wasn't enough, Luo Binghe kidnapped Qiankao Peak's Mu Qingfang. Even the most renowned healer couldn't do anything for a cold corpse. Luo Binghe sure is something else. Sancheng's disciples always call him a demon when they clash, but many abbots of Xiaohua Monastery personally testified that he circulates normal spiritual energy. If the two sects keep battling like this, who knows what could happen? Suddenly, a foul wind blows. The lamps are blown out, and something is wrong. Luo Liu shouts for the lamps to be relit when something catches him by the throat and lifts him from the ground. He and his patrons are saved, though, when a new person bursts into the tavern. Luo Liu couldn't see how he fought, but with a snap, the thread is gone and the lamps were relit. He can see the man now. He's dirty, caked in black mud, and his face obscured by a dark, dense beard. Luo Liu finally stopped shivering and stared him up and down for a long time before cupping his fist. Many, many thanks to this distinguished gentleman for your assistance, chasing away that creature. The person slung an arm over Luo Liu's shoulder. This humble one has something to ask. Please do. What year is it? Shen Qingqiu tumbled his way down the mountain, completely caked in mud, and cursing Airplane Bro the entire way. Originally, he'd planned to fake his death, but how could he pull it off? He'd settled on dying for real and coming back with the Sun Moon Dew mushrooms. That's right. I hope you didn't forget about those mushrooms they found with Gong Yizhao, may he rest in peace, at the end of Volume 1. He and Airplane Bro had done the calculations. He needed to die beneath the highest building in Huayue City, when the sun was at its highest. At the same time, back at Sangqiang, Shang Qinghua activated a second array, so that as soon as Shen Qingqiu's soul left his body, it would be sent to the mushrooms they buried in the mountains of the borderlands. The three locations formed a perfect equilateral triangle. But the chemical fertilizers Airplane Bro used to speed up the mushroom's growth had caused some side effects. Namely, the time it took the mushrooms to accept his soul. It had already been 5 years since his self-destruct, but whatever, this was his fresh start, I guess. It doesn't super matter when he gets started. He checked his appearance when he first crawled out of the dirt. They had designed his face to look more like Shen Yuan's face, but he still looked about 30 to 40% like Shen Qingqiu. Oh well, nothing a good old-fashioned dirt beard can't hide. When Luo Liu asks him for his name, he tells them Peerless Cucumber. Shen Qingqiu is stealing some clean clothes and a fan when he catches a minor demon also stealing. He captures him and tells him off for stealing. Now, this little act of hypocrisy doesn't really matter. There's some world building about how human-made goods can be traded for a lot in the demon world. But I only mention this because the minor demon he caught is named Six Balls. Named because when he was born, his pa held him and said he was 6 balls heavy. What kind of balls? No one knows. Airplane Bro's naming scheme at its finest. Shen Qingqiu privately jokes that, by that logic, Luo Binghe should be called Heavenly Pillar June. Okay, I changed my mind. 6 balls is important. When Shen Qingqiu looks through his stolen goods, he finds a familiar sword tassel. It's Liu Mingyan's. 6 Balls insists that he didn't steal it, but he found it when secretly following some important person that's been coming to the borderlands a lot lately. Shen Qingqiu questions him some more, and then decides this important person probably isn't Luo Binghe. But if Luo Mingyan is in danger, he can't stand by and do nothing. With determination, he heads towards the rift that leads to the demon realm. Shen Qingqiu staked out the rift for hours before a figure stumbles through it. A young man, probably 17 or 18. He looks familiar. He's followed by another that Shen Qingqiu can name, Sha Hualing. And with that, Shen Qingqiu has discovered the identity of the important person wandering the borderlands. If Liu Mingyan had been captured by Sha Hualing, that could be bad. Sha Hualing was petty and jealous, and Liu Mingyan was definitely the prettiest of Luo Binghe's wives. He fires some spiritual energy at Sha Hualing, intending to scare her, but his mushroom body is brimming with chi, so Sha Hualing is launched back at the rift, and her scarves are torn in the process. Damn airplane and his stupid porn book logic. Before he stepped in, Shen Qingqiu heard Sha Hualing call the boy a Baizhan disciple, which, that's weird. Liu Qingge didn't have any direct disciples as far as he knew. With Sha Hualing gone, Shen Qingqiu jumps out of his hiding place and asks him directly. The kid confirms that, yes, he is a disciple under Baizhan's Liu Qingge. I guess some people do change. He asks for his name and the boy says Yang Yishuan. And aha! That's why he looked familiar. It's the kid from Jinlan City. Shen Qingqiu recommended him to Baizhan himself. Good. He's glad. He takes the opportunity to ask some more questions. How is his shizun? Liu Qingge has indeed been fighting and losing to Luo Binghe. How did Yang Yishuan get captured? The kid turns bright red and recounts that Sha Hualing had disguised herself as a woman in need of help. And when he approached, she started taking off her clothes. If not for her dirty tricks, he wouldn't have been captured. Shen Qingqiu understands, but lectures him anyway. Avoiding feminine charms doesn't mean fearing them. Just look at your shizun. Back when he and Liu Qingge fought succubi, Liu Qingge didn't even flinch at a cave full of naked bodies. Yang Yishuan perks up at that. How does Senior know his shizun? Oops! Time to change the subject. Side note. If you're curious about the time where Shen Qingqiu and Liu Qingge fought naked succubi in a cave, just wait for Volume 4. It's covered in one of the extra chapters. One of my favorites for sure. Okay, let's get back to it. Yang Yishuan explains that many cultivators have been going missing. Shen Qingqiu puts together that they must be using the cultivators as vessels to help Luo Binghe control Junmao. Without Papa, he still needs something to channel all the corrupted qi. But without Papa, or rather dual cultivation, whoever he siphoned the energy into would become an empty husk. Yang Yishuan was kept in a single-cell room and didn't see anyone else, but Sha Hualing's lair is just on the other side of the rift. Shen Qingqiu tosses him Liu Mingyan's sword tassel and says he's going to rescue the others. Yang Yishuan says he'll go with him. Even if she starts to take his clothes off, he won't be scared this time. Plus, the demon still has his sword. The two sneak through the rift. They silently make their way through a cave full of piles of rocks that could only be graves. Going deeper, they make it to a large hall. On both sides of the hall were numerous cages, holding tightly bound cultivators in different colored uniforms. Sha Hualing walked over to one of the cages, arms crossed. You people from Sangchang Mountain Sect really are troublesome and annoying. In this cage, Liu Mingyan sat with her veil covering her face, her eyes closed and her legs crossed, impervious to outside matters. Sha Hualing saw that she was being ignored and smiled coldly. That thing on your face, why don't you ever take it off? Oh, I see. Could it be that your face is so ugly that you dare not take it off out of shame? Girl, do you know who you'll envy most in the future? Saying she's ugly is just you giving yourself a thorough slap on the face. Sha Hualing's women's intuition was acting up. No matter how she looked at Liu Mingyan, the cultivator irritated her from every angle. She opened the cage, dragged Liu Mingyan out, and yelled, "Kneel." Liu Mingyan was naturally unwilling to do so. Though she was thoroughly without spiritual energy, she stood firm. Sha Hualing pushed and shoved, but she was so utterly unable to make Liu Mingyan's knees bend even a little. Enraged to the point where steam came out of her ears, she snatched the veil off of Liu Mingyan's face. In that moment, Sha Hualing's delicate, snow-pale face became even more snow-pale. Turn around! Turn around! I want to see! Shen Qingqiu howled internally. Quickly, let me see what the most beautiful woman in the book looks like. All these years, he had been mindful of his status. He couldn't just say, "Hey, Shizzy, I heard you're super pretty and I want to look at your face. May I?" That sounded like something a pervert would say, but having spent so long unable to see Liu Mingyan's face, he felt like he was about to burst. However, before Liu Mingyan could turn around and let him experience the joy of a first glance, malice flashed through Sha Hualing's eyes. Her fingers curved into claws and shot forward towards Liu Mingyan's face. And thus, for the second time that night, Sha Hualing was sent flying. After tossing Sha Hualing away, he promptly turned his head to look at Liu Mingyan, and as soon as he did, his feet slipped out from under him. In the blink of an eye, she'd instantly put her veil back on. What's wrong with letting me have a glance? Sorry, cucumber bro. Yang Yishuan finds his sword and starts hacking through the chains on the cages. Oh shit. Now, Shen Qingshou's all for freeing people from captivity, but okay, Binghe needs something to help him out, and Yang Yishuan just freed the 3 nuns. In PIDW, those 3 were the ones to settle Binghe's chi in the long run, but it's too late now. It's not like he could start shoving people back into cages. He starts freeing people too. He'll just hope Sha Hualing will catch them again. And just his luck, the next cage he opens holds none other than Cho Haitang. He plays it cool and hopes she doesn't see past the beard. Sha Hualing is slowly recovering where she landed. Shen Qingshou recognizes that they are currently in Qi Yun Cave, which is Sha Hualing's personal residence. She claps her hands, and the guards start rushing in. Shen Qingshou starts battling them off with his fan. Suddenly, the guards catch him in a tangle of immortal binding threads. This would have worked if Shen Qingshou's plant body wasn't the equivalent of a nuclear power plant in terms of spiritual energy. With a stomp of his foot, he floods the threads with so much spiritual energy that they all snap at once. The 2 Sangcheng disciples watch and decide that the senior is far more capable than themselves and focus on evacuating everyone they freed. Sha Hualing decides to let them go and focus on the powerful cultivator in front of her. Unfortunately for Shen Qingshou, Sha Hualing's next tactic was to drop a net made of much thicker immortal binding cables directly on him. The weight alone is enough to knock him off his feet. He's been caught. Damn. He just got back, too. Now he's gonna be a human vessel for the protagonist. He really wishes the nuns hadn't gotten away. Sha Hualing goes to the next room over. He can still hear her voice. My lord, it isn't the night of the full moon. Why did you think to visit this subordinate? Although, you came just at the right time. As it turns out, I've prepared a special gift for you. It's right in here. Shen Qingshou doesn't know where he found the energy, but he grabbed the bottom of the net and channeled enough spiritual energy to blast a hole, as well as knock every demon guarding him to the ground. As Shen Qingshou runs away, the system decides to show itself again. He had tried calling for it when he first woke up, but it didn't respond. He really thought he was free.
Contacting customer service.
He switched bodies, so the connection must be bad. Therefore, it needs to contact customer service. Sure. He makes it back through the rift and back to the borderland town. There he finds Yang Yishuan and Liu Mingyan waiting for him. They wanted to make sure he got out all right. Lu Liu is also there and calls out to Mr. Peerless. Shen Qingshou is appropriately embarrassed being called that, but you really did that to yourself. He addresses the disciples again. He asks them to please keep mentions of himself as quiet as possible. A bunch of cultivators already saw him in the cave, but oh well. Yang Yishuan is like, aren't you familiar with my master? Shen Qingshou kind of responds non-committally, but is distracted. Lu Liu is talking to one of his patrons and mentions Liu Binghe and Shen Qingshou. He goes closer to listen. Okay, so this is where Lu Liu begins to weave a tale. No, not a tale, but the truth that they don't want you to know. He's pieced it all together. There's no denying it. The story of Shen Qingshou and Liu Binghe was actually a tragic tale of love and lust. You see, the student fell in love with the teacher. He confessed to his teacher during the Immortal Alliance conference, but Shen Qingshou was righteous and of course rejected his young student. This angered Liu Binghe. He began to force Shen Qingshou to return his feelings, but Shen Qingshou, with more experience, defeated him. Liu Binghe disappeared in shame, and Shen Qingshou, unwilling to sully his disciple's reputation, claimed he died. But Liu Binghe was gaining adventures and experience on his own. Eventually, he rose the ranks of Huanhua Palace. He helped them fabricate the charges against Shen Qingshou to have him imprisoned where they could do unspeakable things to him. Shen Qingshou managed to escape though, and even to run all the way to Huayue City. The peak lords of Sangchang are all of one heart, you see, so the Baizhan war god was there to defend him. Liu Qingge and Liu Binghe engaged in the most intense fight that would certainly end in mutual destruction. Shen Qingshou saw this, couldn't bear the idea of losing either his sworn martial brother or his precious student, so decided to self-destruct to stop the battle. Okay, yeah, so Shen Qingqiu has a couple of issues with this story. For a lot of it, he's mad on Binghe's behalf. The story doesn't paint Binghe in the best light. Understatement of the year. It makes Luo Binghe, stallion protagonist, sound like a pathetic incel sex offender. Shen Qingqiu couldn't believe that anyone who saw Luo Binghe would ever believe whoever he confessed to wouldn't return those feelings. And what was the portrayal of his own character? What happened to Immortal Shen's dubious character and reputation? Now he's some delicate, pale beauty damsel in need of rescuing only to kill himself rather than allow his suitors to fight over him? First of all, he's not even gay, and neither are his two supposed suitors. A man with 600 wives could only be the straightest man in the world. And if Luo Binghe is the straightest, then Liu Qingge is undoubtedly the second straightest man in the world. Absolutely ridiculous. 0 stars. Worthless trash. Pathetic waste of space writing that Shen Qingqiu drops the kids off out of the borderlands and starts walking the opposite way. He's walking for a while when... who's that walking besides him? It's Xia Hualing. He's like, 2 defeats weren't enough, come back for more. And she's like, no thanks, I can't beat you, but I don't actually have to. That's when Shen Qingqiu realizes something is wrong and oh so familiar. Fuck. You see, once you've felt heavenly demon blood moving around inside you, you can't mistake it for anything else. Xia Hualing is smug while she describes sneaking it into his food in town. Damn Lu Liu and his gossip, he was distracted. Shen Qingqiu is terrified when Luo Binghe steps out, but he can't move with the blood freezing him in place. Luo Binghe looks not good. According to PIDW, his cultivation should have stabilized after his Demon Realm arc. Plus, with every human vessel, he should only get more stable. But Luo Binghe looks haggard, not stable at all, and he's mad. It takes Shen Qingqiu a second to figure out if he's mad at him or Xia Hualing. You see, Xia Hualing's been gathering cultivators for Luo Binghe to use for quite a while now. There was one time when she brought him someone that resembled his Shizwen about 50%. She thought he'd maybe enjoyed someone who looked like his late love. He didn't. Luo Binghe was so angry, he nearly wiped out everyone in Qiyun Cave that day. But this time wasn't her fault. She hadn't gotten a good look at the guy's face before grabbing him. She just knew that his vast stores of spiritual energy made him an ideal human vessel. And even if you don't care about her, think about the Holy Mausoleum. Those 2 words snapped Luo Binghe out of his rage. The Holy Mausoleum was the place where the past generations of the demon race's ruling class were laid to eternal rest. Other than the current supreme ruler, the miscellaneous remainder of demonkind were, with no exceptions, forbidden from entering, and all visitors were killed. Inside the mausoleum, there were countless treasures and powerful artifacts, including one that could bring someone back from the dead. In PIDW, with Xia Hualing's help, Luo Binghe was able to climb to the top of the demon realm, and all of those treasures became his. For her to mention it now meant Luo Binghe must still need her for something. But really, it's such a shame to see Xia Hualing's treatment right now. As a true PIDW fan, Shen Qingqiu knew that she almost always ranked in the top 3 of the wife popularity polls. Now look at her. Shen Qingqiu laments as attention is brought back to him. Luo Binghe is picking him up and...
Touch verification successful. Connected to central power source, storing power. System self-evaluation, all operations normal. Thank you for your continued patronage.
Great. Not only is the system back and fully operational, but the protagonist is using him like a portable battery pack. He can feel his vast energy being depleted by half, only for his plant body to replenish it the next second, only for the protagonist to absorb that too the next, and so on and so forth. Luo Binghe drops him when he's taken his fill. He looks surprised, which I guess makes sense. Shen Qingqiu's plant body has exponentially more spiritual energy than Luo Binghe's previous vessels. It has nothing to do with his familiar face and chi signature. Definitely not. Speaking of his face, Luo Binghe accepts him with one last threat to Xia Hualing. Whatever. Just don't let me see him using that face again. So what? Is Shen Qingqiu one of Luo Binghe's lackeys now? Like hell. We learn a bunch of stuff wandering around Huanhua Palace. Liu Qingge came twice in the time Luo Binghe was gone. Guess the rumors about him coming every day are true. Shen Qingqiu feels guilty. The little palace mistress is still around. She's noticeably less taken with Luo Binghe than the last time Shen Qingqiu saw her. Also, her father seems to be missing, though Luo Binghe insists that the old palace master is cultivating in seclusion. The little palace mistress isn't convinced. She gets so hysterical that other disciples have to come and drag her off. Xia Hualing yells at Qin Wanyue for not keeping the little palace mistress in line, and for failing to seduce the boss yet again. Shen Qingqiu realizes these women aren't living anywhere close to their lives described in PIDW. He carefully counted on his fingers. Xia Hualing was not made a wife, but a subordinate, toils to death on overtime, and her pay and benefits are nothing to write home about. From her boss's attitude, doesn't look like he wants an office romance either. Liu Mingyan didn't even exchange the sword tassel love token. Ning Yingying, after puberty, stopped demonstrating the fantastical love from her naive youth towards the male lead. Seems like her lovesick brain had been cured. The little palace mistress, bitter, locked-up woman. She herself said that Luo Binghe treats her like a kept pig. Qin Wanyue, bitter, locked-up woman the sequel, failed at offering herself countless times, moonlights as the little palace mistress's nanny. Chou Haitong, after dragging Shen Qingqiu down, she's supposed to be happily going down to Cucktown with Luo Binghe. Why is she still wandering about like a vagrant? The three Taoist nuns, a second in the spotlight, hello and goodbye. As the hale and hearty male lead of a stallion novel, are you doing okay or not?
Ning Ying subverted the trope of a female character being a brainless martyr for love. B points plus 100.
Ming Fan
Subverted the trope of a side character being an illogical idiot. B points plus 50.
Liu Mingyan
Subverted the trope of a female character being a nonsensical martyr for love. B points plus 150.
Could it be? Shen Qingqiu couldn't resist the urge to raise his eyes and take in Luo Binghe's dismal expression. He suddenly felt he couldn't stare straight at him anymore. It was criminal. Criminal. Could it be that he'd raised an otherwise totally fine stallion novel male lead to be asexual? Shen Qingqiu closes his system window, only to look around and notice, hold on. He was in Huanhua Palace before, but now, looking around, everything looks like his changing peak. And, damn, Shen Qingqiu fell asleep again. Somehow, in his unstable state, Luo Binghe had pulled him into his dreamscape again. And because dreams and dream logic, Shen Qingqiu looked like Shen Qingqiu again, beardless and all. Shen Qingqiu decides to hide in the bamboo. The figures walking around the dreamscape are figments of Luo Binghe's mind, but they all have fully formed faces, expressionless as they may be. Well done, Luo Binghe. Even Master Meng Mo couldn't form every face when he pulled them into that dream trap all those years ago. As expected of the protagonist, from the tree line, Shen Qingqiu watches teenage Luo Binghe. He feels sad. Shen Qingqiu can't help missing that cute White Lotus disciple. Dream Binghe calls for his Shizwen. Shen Qingqiu watches the dream version of himself appear. The dream student-teacher pair go through a routine that Shen Qingqiu remembers well. Binghe just finished running laps that Shen Qingqiu assigned him for endurance training. So the pair spar a little until Luo Binghe trips into his Shizwen's arms. Dream Shen Qingqiu just sighs and says they'll work on it again tomorrow. Dream Bing Bing looks like a little puppy with his tail wagging as he promises to work harder and asks what Shizwen would like to eat for dinner. Our Shen Qingqiu watches the scene pretty confused. Is Luo Binghe some kind of masochist? Shouldn't he be dreaming about the good times, i.e. time spent with Ning Yingying? And then Shen Qingqiu spots Luo Binghe. Real Luo Binghe, fully grown, black robes a-flowin', also watching the scene of master and disciple. And then that Luo Binghe sees Shen Qingqiu hiding in the trees. Shen Qingqiu freezes in place to mimic the unmoving, expressionless dream figures he saw earlier. And this works! Okay, this scene is amazing. Both of them start using the fact that this is a dream to act on their real feelings. Luo Binghe is sad and hurt, and he just wants comfort, and Shen Qingqiu thinks he can get away with it because this is Luo Binghe's dream. He wants him to act comforting, so he can. Luo Binghe doesn't know that it's really him. He won't be going for revenge. Hurting a dream creation would only be hurting himself after all. Little does he know that, yeah, Luo Binghe often dreams of Shen Qingqiu, but his dream Shen Qingqiu's never seem to see or acknowledge Luo Binghe at all. Maybe it's Binghe's guilt or self-loathing, but even in dreams, Shizun just walks away without saying a word. So he thinks he finally did it. A dream where Shizun sees him, is even willing to speak with him. Is his imagination finally indulging him? Does he even deserve this? Oh well, Luo Binghe isn't strong enough to let this opportunity go. Shizun is talking to him. Shizun is patting his head. Sure, Shizun isn't real, but Luo Binghe kisses Shen Qingqiu, and it's pretty bad. In PIDW, Luo Binghe is the best in the world at the art of seduction. A kiss from him could make any woman willingly give up their hopes and dreams to join his harem, convince them that what they really want is to marry Luo Binghe. When Binghe kisses him, he, 1, uses way too much teeth. Shen Qingqiu feels more like he's being eaten than kissed, and is 2, way too desperate. Is this the reason Binghe hadn't slept with any of his wives yet? Was he coming to the dream world to pa fake Shen Qingqiu's? Eventually, he pushes him away, and Luo Binghe looks wounded. Oh shit. Shen Qingqiu was wrong. He didn't raise an asexual protagonist. Jury's still out on whether he's a masochist, but the Luo Binghe he raised was gay. No wonder he had no interest in the armies of beauties throwing themselves at him. Had he doomed the world? Had he doomed every beautiful woman by making their dream man unavailable? Shen Qingqiu has no idea what to do. And he's still kissing the protagonist. Shen Qingqiu thinks he might have to kick the heavenly pillar when Luo Binghe pulls away suddenly. The sky above the dream world goes dark. Something is wrong. The dream world shatters and Shen Qingqiu is awake again. There must have been some kind of spell to alert Luo Binghe of the things happening in the waking world, because Huanhua disciples are running about, sounding the alarms. Someone broke in. Shen Qingqiu thinks it's ideal to use the chaos to escape, but of course, it's Liu Qingge who broke in. Who else could it be? Damn it. He goes to help his shitty, who is currently Kool-Aid manning it through Huanhua Palace. He follows the destruction and broken walls to a room, and look. Okay, this might look kind of bad. The room is leaking frosty air from the blown-out wall. There's a platform with a pale corpse laying behind flowing curtains. His corpse. The whole room was like an icebox coffin. His icebox coffin. Liu Qingge is shouting, and there's a rustling from the platform. Luo Binghe rises, dressed only in his inner robes, hair messy from sleep, from the same platform that keeps Shen Qingqiu's corpse. Okay, now, did Luo Binghe sleep with his Shizun's corpse? I mean, in a very literal sense, yeah, he was sleeping next to a dead body. Did Luo Binghe sleep with his Shizun's corpse in a more necromantic sense? Well, Liu Qingge sure thinks so. I'm not as convinced. Okay, seriously, hear me out. It looks bad, I know, but trust me. Now, I'm not just trying to free Bing Bing of the freak allegations. He's for sure freaky, but he wouldn't do this. Binghe only indulged himself in a dream because it was a dream. He didn't think he was with the real Shen Qingqiu. Why would he? Binghe pretty much
This system will save listeners some time and confirm that the body in question is still infected with without a cure poison that can only be cured by dual cultivation with a heavenly demon.
Anyway, let's keep going. Here we go, chapter 11. Liu Qingge confronts Luo Binghe. Shen Qingqiu has the absolute displeasure of watching the two of them fight over his barely clothed corpse. At one point, Liu Qingge yells, like, "Beast! He's still your Shizun, how could you do this?" And Binghe's like, "What? You think I would do this with anyone else?" Comedy gold. So they're fighting. Liu Qingge is slowly losing ground, despite Luo Binghe fighting with a corpse cradled in his arms. At one point, Shen Qingqiu sneaks behind Liu Qingge and starts sharing spiritual energy. A fun flip of their usual setup for dealing without a cure. Cute. Liu Qingge wonders who he is, but whoever it is helping him, so he just keeps fighting. He sends a powerful blast at Luo Binghe, who is forced to throw the body to avoid it. Shen Qingqiu takes the opportunity to jump up and grab it. He feels particularly bullied by the sheer absurdity of watching his own body be ragdolled around. Shen Qingqiu rights the body's clothes as much as possible before throwing it to Liu Qingge. Luo Binghe's eyes had turned fully scarlet. His entire Huanhua pavilion was like a tightly sealed box, and inside the box, a bomb had been placed. When the bomb exploded, the walls collapsed with a loud rumble. Falling alongside the flying sand and hurtling stones, aside from people, and more people, were two objects that hit the ground with a metallic clang. When Shen Qingqiu focused and looked, he saw they were actually two swords, Shenyang and Zhuya. The two swords had originally shared the same fate, broken into numerous sections of blade shards. It was unclear how they'd been repaired, but they had been tied together and placed in Huanhua Pavilion. With only the pavilion's collapse did they once again see the sun and sky. Seeing these two swords once again left an indescribable feeling in Shen Qingqiu's heart. He looked towards Luo Binghe, whose clothes had been disheveled from the start, and after that wave of explosions, his clear-cut collarbones and chest lay entirely exposed. Near where his heart lay, there snaked a hideous-looking sword wound. Luo Binghe's ability to regenerate was surpassingly powerful. Even if his limbs were chopped off, he could flawlessly reattach them. If you went a bit more hardcore, he could even grow new ones without problem. Unless he purposefully chose not to heal an injury, there were no wounds he couldn't mend, and none that would leave a scar. Luo Binghe wanted to take action, but abruptly, a violent tremor shook his heart, and Shinmo's sudden recoil forced him still for a beat. Due to this one missed beat, he could only watch helplessly as Liu Qingge flew off with Shen Qingqiu's corpse under his arm. He remained in place in a daze, blankness flickering over his face for an instant. He'd forgotten to even return fire. He had the appearance of a child who'd had his entire world, his most beloved things, snatched away from him, whose sky was about to collapse and fall. Shen Qingqiu had originally planned to take advantage of the chaos to slip away, but when he saw this, for some reason his feet remained stuck in place, and that unbearable flash from before grew even stronger. He wanted to say, "Don't be so sad, Shizun isn't dead." Just as he moved his lips, a black shadow sprang out from the group of Huanhua Palace disciples. That silhouette was unbelievably fast and nimble. It snatched Shen Qingqiu up like a whirlwind and left just like that. Luo Binghe's eyesight and reflexes were exceptional, yet the spiritual blast he had fired managed to miss. Okay. A bunch of stuff. We get to see the scar that Shen Qingqiu gave him on the edge of the Endless Abyss. Binghe's healing ability could have gotten rid of the wound before he even made it to the bottom of the abyss, but Binghe couldn't bring himself to get rid of anything his Shizun gave him, including injury. And then there's Zhuya. Just like Shen Qingqiu gathering the remains of Zhangyang, Luo Binghe gathered up all the pieces of Zhuya, and because he has Zhangyang, that means he visited the Sword Mound in Qingjing. Poor Bing Bing, he must have been so sad these last 5 years. And I get it, we're reading from Shen Qingqiu's POV, and Binghe seems mad, literally, all the time. But look at him, he's sad and scared, and they could never make me hate you, Luo Binghe. Anyway, let's check back in on Plant Shizun, who's been kidnapped, rescued, whatever. Luo Binghe remembered all the blood parasites in the guy who let Liu Qingge get away with his Shizun's body. He's going to town. Yeah, Shen Qingqiu's not really paying attention to anything else, including the guy hovering over him, asking him stuff, whatever. Eventually, the pain starts going down. Shen Qingqiu realizes the man is touching his chest. Goddamn! Now that the protagonist is gay, I guess the world is just full of handsome twinks to cradle Shen Qingqiu. At least whatever he's doing is helping. The guy makes him drink something. It's gross, but it's super effective. He can barely feel the blood parasites at all now. Who knew there was a cure for heavenly demon blood? PIDW had made it seem like the most OP of OP plot devices. Heavenly demons were the most powerful and awesome for a reason. Shen Qingqiu thought the only thing that could beat a heavenly demon would be another heavenly demon, and oh shit. He just drank another heavenly demon's blood, didn't he? Shen Qingqiu passes out. He wakes up in Luo Binghe's dreamscape again. Woohoo! Time for Dreams of Actually Communicating Part 2! This one's admittedly a little darker though. Luo Binghe is standing on a pile of the corpses of his dream constructions. He's been killing them. As we know, harming the dream constructions only serves to harm the dreamer. Binghe has some pretty masochistic tendencies, sure, but this level of self-torture? Shen Qingqiu can't help running over to him, scolding him for hurting himself, wiping his brow. Binghe tells him how sorry he is that he lost his body, that he failed him again. He tells him that he healed all his meridians and he was planning on getting into the holy mausoleum so that he could call his soul back. Shen Qingqiu sees another scar on Luo Binghe's otherwise perfect skin. This one's on his hand. It's from Jinlan City, when Shen Qingqiu got between Luo Binghe and Liu Qingge. Shen Qingqiu realizes a lot. The Binghe he had raised was soft and sentimental as much as he was strong and talented. Twice, Shen Qingqiu had aimed his sword at him, and Binghe had made no effort to dodge, going so far as to let the wounds scar. He realizes that, no matter how similar they look, this is not the ruthless stallion protagonist of PIDW. This is Luo Binghe, his sticky disciple who loves cooking and head pats, and he's in desperate need of comfort. Luo Binghe also makes a lot of realizations in this dream, but we'll have to come back to those. Shen Qingqiu wakes up on a bed under a gauzy canopy, a mysterious young man tending to him. This seems to happen to him a lot. Such is the life of a transmigrator. Okay, so this guy's a heavenly demon, judging by the blood he made him drink. In PIDW, Luo Binghe was the last heavenly demon after his father, Tianlan Jun, was sealed under Bailu Mountain by the Four Great Sects. But this isn't Tianlan Jun. The guy introduces himself as Zhu Long, Tianlan Jun's first general and nephew. This is Luo Binghe's cousin. Dun-da-da! New character alert! Zhu Long is a fan favorite too. He's timid in nature and very polite. He calls Shen Qingqiu Immortal Master Shen, so he knows who he is. Great. Shen Qingqiu's fake beard has completely fallen off at this point, by the way. Nothing to do about it now, I guess. Shen Qingqiu thanks him for the help getting away from Huanghua Palace and for caring for him afterwards. Zhu Long tells him that a drop of kindness should be repaid by a flood. Moreover, kindness from Immortal Master Shen has far exceeded a drop, and Shen Qingqiu recognizes him. That's right, this isn't the first time that we've seen Zhu Long. He was the little ugly snake demon that Shen Qingqiu kept Gong Yizhao, rest in peace, from stepping on in Bailu Forest. Shen Qingqiu's like, okay, I saved your life, you saved mine, but Zhu Long's like, you also helped me get a hold of the Sun Moon Dew mushrooms, so I'd like to bring you back to the demon world to repay you. Now, Shen Qingqiu doesn't really want to go to the demon world. Zhu Long, bless him, is a bit creepy. Love that for him. He keeps Shen Qingqiu from leaving with the demon snakes he planted in his bedding and clothes. Shen Qingqiu, monster that he is, thinks the snakes are kind of cute, despite feeling adequately threatened. And count it, Zhu Long is smitten. Another is lost to the Shen Qingqiu wife beam. They're sticking together for the time being. Shen Qingqiu requests to be brought to a brothel. Is he trying to escape the gay allegations? The answer might surprise you. They end up at the Warm Red Pavilion. Side note, the Warm Red Pavilion was actually the brothel that the original Shen Qingqiu used to frequent. Oh, it makes me so sad. The brothel madam actually pauses seeing Plant Shen Qingqiu's face, saying that his appearance reminds her of an old acquaintance. Of course, they hadn't seen their loyal patron since Shen Yuan took over. The fact that she still remembers Shen Qingqiu, even though it's been like a decade, the implications make me so sad. Let's get back to it. Shen Qingqiu uses Zhu Long's money to request wine and entertainment. The ladies provide. They start singing this raunchy love ballad called The Regret of Chunshan. It tells the iconic affair of Shen Qingqiu and Luo Binghe. I know, right? To summarize the plot, and this is a direct quote, by the way. To summarize the plot, in short, this was a shameless master and disciple pair who spent all day on some nameless mountain ignoring their duties to knock boots, who went down the mountain to fight monsters and take trips to Pound Town, who used two-person push-ups to settle misunderstandings, who still needed to play a round of hide the sausage before dying, who continued to ride the Boney Express after death, and who, after resurrection, would gleefully smack each other's salmons as before. Sort of story. The brothel ladies are all super into it. Relatable. Some of them are even moved to tears. Same queen. Shen Qingqiu is horrified, naturally. Zhu Long is also very embarrassed. He's shy. Zhu Long tries to excuse himself, but he feels faint. Shen Qingqiu's plan worked. He, with Zhu Long's money, got the Warm Red Pavilion ladies to gather the town's supply of railgar wine, boil it, and fan the fumes around the pavilion. So I had to look up railgar wine. Context clues tells me it's some sort of snake repellent or something, but this is the first time I've actually looked into it. So railgar wine is traditionally drunk during the Dragon Boat Festival during the summer. It's a yellow wine dosed with a powdered arsenic sulfide mineral, or railgar. Railgar was sprinkled around houses in ancient times to ward off insects and snakes. In traditional Chinese medicine, it was used as a sort of universal antidote for poisons. Cool, the more you know. Zhuzhelong begins stumbling around like he's drunk before his demon form comes out, which happens to be a giant snake. Shen Qingqiu evacuates the brothel workers and jumps around to avoid the giant snake trying to coil around him. They boiled so much wine that the entire town carries the fumes. Shen Qingqiu directs Zhuzhelong away from the town with his fan before jumping on a rented sword to fly back to Sanchang Mountain. Also, he says goodbye to Zhuzhelong, calling him Zhijilang, which is a modern Chinese jelly brand. Cute! Alright, folks, we got 20 pages. One more chapter left in Volume 2. I gotta be real. This one ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, so be prepared. I promise I'll try to get my Volume 3 episode out as soon as possible. If you don't want to wait, you can always pick up a copy. I promise it's worth it. Volume 3 is fantastic, and Volume 4 has all the fun extras. I will never stop in my agenda to get more people to read Scum Villain. Okay, let's do this. 2 days after leaving Huanhua, Shen Qingqiu makes it to Sangchang. He lands at the village at the base of the mountain. He buys new clothes and a hat, and he sends his rented sword to fly back on its own. Still all with Zhuzhelong's money. He's about to start the trek up the mountain, but a villager stops him. The Immortal Sect has been under siege the last 2 days. It's not the best time to make the journey. Uh-oh. Shen Qingqiu can't make it up there fast enough. He finds Jiangding Peak on fire. Mu Qingfang is running around tending to injured disciples scattered about. Yue Qingyuan stands in front of the other peak lords. They face Luo Binghe and Mo Beijun. It seems to be a lull in the fighting. Shen Qingqiu feels guilty for letting things get this bad. Luo Binghe takes the nameplate from the Jiangding lecture hall. It's the same nameplate that Sha Hualing had tried and failed to take in the invasion years ago. The irony is not missed on anyone. Yue Qingyuan chastises Luo Binghe. It was your Shizun that defended the plate all those years ago. Who was injured protecting you, Luo Binghe? It seemed Shen Qingqiu's body had been taken to the ancestral hall to be buried with the generations of Qingjing peak lords. Shen Qingqiu missed his own funeral. None of his martial siblings look like they're doing okay. The guilt is back. Luo Binghe lets it slip that he's just stalling. He won't kill any of them for his Shizun's sake, but he needs to stall a little longer, like he's waiting for someone to appear. Attack, said Luo Binghe. Mo Beijun let out an "oh" and stepped forward, before suddenly saying, "I already have many times." All those exploded ice shards, those holes pitting the walls and ground outside the hall, were his great works. Then get someone else to attack in your place, said Luo Binghe. Mo Beijun nodded, reached behind himself, and scooped up a cowering figure. He dangled this person like a little chick and tossed him into the large empty space between the two sides with a plop. Shang Qinghua's soul was about to fly away. He crawled to his feet in terror when the people of Sangchang Mountain saw him. Fire nearly spewed from their eyes. It wasn't just them. Shen Qingqiu was also about to spew raging flames from his eyes and mouth. That trouble-causing fucker. Great Master Airplane shooting towards the sky. Qi Qingqi drew her sword with a whoosh and yelled, "Traitor!" Shang Qinghua smiled obsequiously. "Qi Shimei, if you have something to say it properly. Don't wave your sword around like that. You're so pretty. If you were only a bit gentler." Qi Qingqi had already sent her sword flying in his direction, yelling in rage, "Who's your Shimei?" Shang Qinghua hurriedly dodged, hiding behind Mo Beijun. Devoid of sympathy, Mo Beijun kicked him right back out. "I was forced against my will, don't be like this," Shang Qinghua said, with a long-suffering look. "If anyone sees us comrades fighting amongst ourselves, we'll be ridiculed." Shen Qingqiu was flabbergasted. Shang Qinghua had even less integrity than he'd imagined. To be able to say something like this now, it was genuinely a bit shameless. The two of them chased each other around the hall, in what was basically a screwball slapstick scene. Shen Qingqiu watched from the side, his heart rising and falling along with it. Oh fuck, almost got him. Qi Qingqi, go for the crotch, awesome. Liu Qingge withdrew the spiritual energy he was feeding into Yue Qingyuan's back, having finished the stabilization, and stood. Cheng Yuan trembled in its sheath, letting out a buzzing cry. Yang Yishuang cupped his fist. "Shizun, you've been fighting that demon for an entire day." "Stand down," Liu Qingge said heavily. Luo Binghe gave him a glance, then smiled and said lightly, "Ah, the loser I defeated." Cheng Luan flared, its sword glare sweeping past Luo Binghe's cheek and whipping up his hair. Luo Binghe put a hand on his sword that hung at his waist, returning bite for bite. You overestimate yourself. In the end, however, the two swords failed to cross again. Shen Qingqiu stood between them. Sword energy surged and collided from both sides, promptly splitting the bamboo hat that he'd been wearing for appearances in two. With his left hand, he caught the point of Cheng Luan between two fingers, preventing Liu Qingge from advancing another moot, while his right hand pushed down on the hand Luo Binghe had placed on Jinmo, preventing him from drawing it. It's only a body, everyone. Only a body. There's no need for this. Shen Qingqiu looked to his left, then looked to his right. Those words still unspoken on his tongue. Then Luo Binghe abruptly flipped his hand over and grabbed his wrist, fastening around it securely like a shackle of ice. The smile on his face almost looked twisted as he articulated each word. Caught you, Shizun. He's not dead! Surprise, everybody! All his sectmates and disciples are rightfully shocked, but Shen Qingqiu's only paying attention to Luo Binghe. This was Luo Binghe's plan, to draw him out. Luo Binghe is the best, most talented cultivator and demon. Of course he could tell the difference between the conjurings of his own mind and his actual Shizun. Those dreams revealed that he was indeed alive. If Shen Qingqiu had been successfully avoiding him for the last 5 years, then it would take nothing less than a full-scale invasion on his precious Sangchang Mountain sect to draw him out. Oh, come on. I thought you two were done with the misunderstandings. Everyone else is still confused. Luo Binghe draws Shang Qinghua forward to explain their daring plot to fake his death using the Sun Moon Dew mushrooms. Damn traitor. And now, Yue Qingyuan and the other sect members look so betrayed. They'd mourned him. How could he, to go 5 years without sending a single word to those who care about him? But it's not like that. Yeah, I mean, it had been 5 years, but Shen Qingqiu crawled out of the ground like, 3 days ago? This is all Shang Qinghua's fault. They all just start yelling at each other. Nothing's being resolved. Shen Qingqiu finally has enough. If Luo Binghe came here to capture him, then fine, he'll go with him willingly. Sangchang is not happy about this, of course. They are willing to fight for him, but Shen Qingqiu can see that they are far outmatched. Liu Qingge nobly declares that it doesn't matter how much Shen Qingqiu feels he burdens Sangchang Mountain. It will gladly bear his burdens. Ouch, right in the heartstrings, Liu Shitty. But Shen Qingqiu can see that more of the Baijian Peak Lord's bones are broken than not. Yue Qingyuan looks like he's about to draw Zhuan Su, but Mu Qingfang stops him. The sect leader had gone into seclusion after the death of his shudi, but the invasion had interrupted him. He's not in any condition to be fighting right now. Drawing his sword might actually kill him, but he already had to watch Shen Qingqiu die once. How could he let it happen again? Shen Qingqiu's had enough. In his own words, he was too ashamed to let Sangchang Mountain and its sect leader continue to wipe his ass and pay the bill. The Peak Lord of Scholars truly has a way with words. His disciple, his responsibility. He will deal with Luo Binghe on his own, thank you very much. This time, it's Ning Yingying who runs forward. She's crying. How come it's always Shizun who has to suffer? When will it be enough? Shen Qingqiu tried to get Ming Fan to back him up, but his disciples just team up on him. There's Shizun prostrating himself to demons again, for their sakes. Isn't that a fate worse than death? Shen Qingqiu, can't you get it through your head that these people all care about you? He doesn't get it. Luo Binghe says he wants Shen Qingqiu's old body too. Shen Qingqiu really doesn't get it. He's like, sure. His martial siblings disagree. Things start looking like they're about to start ramping up again when Liu Mingyan shows up to save the day. She whispers something to Qi Qingqi, who gives the go-ahead to share with the rest of the class. Shen Qingqiu's immortal body has gone missing. They couldn't give him all his demands even if they wanted to. Qi Qingqi had set her head disciple to take Shen Qingqiu's corpse and hide it, but she'd found that someone else got to it first. All the disciples guarding the tomb were knocked unconscious. Mu Qingfang says they were poisoned, but they'll recover. Luo Binghe denies all involvement. He doesn't like poisons. No matter, he'll track down whoever did this. Shen Qingqiu asks him to end the siege. Of course, Shizun, whatever you say. But it's the Sangchang Mountain sect who can't leave well enough alone. Volume 2 ends with Liu Qingge leaping up to attack, Cheng Yuan in hand, and blood flowing down his sword arm. He won't go down without a fight. Will he finally win against Luo Binghe? Who stole the body? Will Shen Qingqiu die again in Luo Binghe's clutches? What will happen next? We'll find out all of this and more in the next volume. Volume 3 has the thrilling conclusion of the main story of the Scum villain's self-saving system. Stay tuned. Thanks everyone for listening. Talking about Scum villain like this has become my coping mechanism for escaping the shitstorm that is American politics. Stay safe out there, and I'll be back in the next one soon. I want to go off script again. Ooh boy. It's taking a lot for me to not talk about my all-time favorite character throughout all of fiction, Shenjiao, aka the original Scum villain. Don't judge me. I know he's functionally dead for the entire story, but he means a lot to me. But even though so many tasty hints have been dropped, we don't get to see his full realized character until Volume 3. And even like Volume 4. So I'll save my full rant for then. In the meantime, let's talk about some of my other favorite characters. Okay, I'm realizing that like almost every character in this goddamn book can be called my favorite. But who am I kidding? This isn't surprising at all. Anyways, let's talk about the wife trio. And by wife trio, I mean Ning Yingying, Lu Mingyan, and Xia Hualing. I actually love them so much. And if you think you recognize me from a certain cosplaying TikTok account, shh, no you don't. I can really appreciate how much development these three get. Like, obviously, they still get minimal screen time compared to, like, Shen Qingqiu or Luo Binghe or even Liu Qingge, but I feel like so many MLM stories, especially Asian MLM stories, aren't really nice to their female characters. I love that all three of them branch away from their PIDW characters, and the system deems it as a great success towards making the story better. Not one of them is actually in love with Luo Binghe. And they're not becoming antagonists trying to keep the OTP apart out of jealousy. That sounds ridiculous, because it is. Seriously, one of the worst BL tropes. It probably helps that I see them as all really lesbian-coded. Don't think about TikTok. We talked about this. But seriously, I totally ship the three of them together. A lot of the fandom ships Liu Mingyan and Xia Hualing. It's a classic enemies to lovers. They had that fight during the demon invasion. No one can deny the inherent eroticism of sparring your rival. And then Xia Hualing is the only person to canonically see Liu Mingyan's face uncovered. Perfect! And that her reaction is just intense sapphic blushing, like, cover up, cover up! Absolutely perfect. But I think Ning Yingying shouldn't be left out of this. We get to see her character go through the most change. She starts pretty annoying, causing all sorts of problems and starting conflicts with bad writing choices. Seriously, she doesn't act at all like a person who has any concept of cause and effect. Terrible. But the story has to go on. She's still a bit of a troublemaker who likes making chaos, but it's more intentional. She has motives, and she's willing to sass off anyone and everyone who wants to push her aside, and she still likes getting Ming Fan to do whatever she wants. Honestly, she reminds me of Shen Qingqiu. She must have been his favorite for a reason, right? Apples and trees? But I said I wouldn't talk about him, so I'll move on. I love the idea of Liu Mingyan dragging her two least children girlfriends around, but don't worry about Liu Mingyan, she still has some secrets of her own. Ning Yingying and Xia Hualing don't really interact one-on-one throughout the books, but I can picture it pretty easily. They're both troublemakers. I think they might fight a lot, but they have to, because if they weren't fighting, the two could probably take over the world. I'm picturing like Hitachi twin levels of chaos, or on High School Host Club Nation, rise up. I can't wait for all the stuff my girlies get to do with the rest of the story. Like I said, Liu Mingyan gets up to some fun stuff, and if you want some more Xia Hualing content, she gets to do more in the extra chapters. Okay, this is way too long, but I'm having fun. Until next time, remember everyone in your life that might need their own little cute. We sure do have it rough out there. Bye.